Good evening and welcome. This is the February 26, 2025 public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses, including plan development, zoning relief, and appeals from the decisions of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will make either a final determination or send its recommendations to the City Council. Ms. Jones, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo, Commissioner Berlin. Here. Commissioner Halleck. Here. Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Mabadi.
Here.
Commissioner Mangum.
Here.
Commissioner Medinchev.
Here.
Commissioner Puctel.
Here.
And Chair Linwall.
Here. With what, 7? Oh. Okay. With 7 members present, we have a quorum. I'd also like to note that we have a new commissioner, Lauren Berlin, to welcome this evening. And also present tonight from city staff are neighborhood and land use planner Megan Jones, planning manager Liz Williams, deputy city manager Steve Ruger, policy and intergovernmental affairs manager Allison Lepsiger, community development Sarah Flax, and planning and policy supervisor Erin Baines, who is also brand new. This is a formal hearing, and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time, so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on tonight's agenda will have an opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. The chair will determine the time allotted to each speaker based on the number of speakers signed up. Any resident may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record and sign in on the provided public comment sheet. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal as it relates to the standards contained in the zoning ordinance and corresponding staff memorandum. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you're at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Our hearings for the proposed comprehensive plan will vary slightly from our regular meeting structure. We will be holding public hearings for the purpose of receiving testimony from the residents, business owners, and other interested parties on this important document. Tonight's meeting will be about the comprehensive plan only. Any discussions on the development of a new zoning ordinance will be deferred until the public has had a chance to share their input on the revised plan draft. Since the revised comprehensive plan draft has only been available since February 21st, we do not anticipate closing the public hearing tonight. One of the discussion items that the commission will be considering this evening is a revised timeline for the development of the comprehensive plan. Representatives from key boards and commissions were asked to provide input on relevant chapters in the initial draft of the comprehensive plan. And as we move forward this evening, I would recommend to my fellow commissioners that these bodies also be afforded an opportunity to provide comments and recommendations on the current plan draft as we discuss the plan development timeline. After receiving those reports and input from the public, commissioners will be in a position to provide input to staff on the additions and amendments that we would like to see incorporated in the final plan. I would suggest the organization and format for tonight's meeting. There'll be a staff presentation providing an overview of the new plan draft. Then I would request that we have, allow commissioners to ask questions of staff about the process and, receive responses from staff. Then I think we need to talk about the tentative timeline for completion of the comprehensive plan. Then I would propose we do public testimony, allowing all of you to weigh in on what's before us, understanding that we know that you haven't had very much time to look at the document, nor has the Land Use Commission. So with that said, the schedule anticipates that there will be additional opportunities for dialogue with the community. And then following the public testimony, to the extent that it's needed, there may be additional discussion among commissioners and staff on next steps. And with that, I think probably the motion to reopen the public hearing would be appropriate. So can I have a motion to reopen the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, I moved to reopen the public comments on the comprehensive plan, the new version.
Is there a second?
Second.
Do we need a roll call on this, or just all in favor say aye? Okay.
Aye.
With that, the public hearing is reopened for public testimony and staff presentation. And, kind of as part of, since this is a public hearing, if you plan on speaking this evening, you need to be sworn in. So please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? Thank you. With that, I think I will open it up to city staff.
Okay, good evening, Chair Lindwall and members of the commission. Happy to be here to introduce version 2.0 of Evanston's comprehensive plan. So we have a short presentation from staff tonight for you, and just want to echo the sentiments. We know you all just received this on Friday, and so not a lot of time to digest it, but we're looking forward to the discussion later on the timeline and how we can ensure that we get as much feedback and come up with a great plan at the end. So I'm going to start with, where are we in the process? So first and foremost, thank you to a bunch of people. First of all, the Land Use Commission for your diligence in helping us get to this point. I do want to thank staff who have been working very hard to digest comments from the public and come up with the version 2.0 that we're presenting to you tonight. And then most importantly, I want to thank the public and our residents for their feedback in helping us get to a much better plan and move forward. So our community has engaged and improved the first draft. So the second draft has been adapted heavily to reflect that community engagement. And so I want to just assure the public that we've been looking at the comments we've been receiving, and we have been mindful in incorporating as much as we can into the second version. So I think anyone who's had a chance to see that, the second version, and look at it, hopefully is seeing those changes being presented. But we have more to go, and we welcome more feedback as we go through review of the second version. But I do want to make clear that the first draft of the zoning code that we originally contemplated to run in tandem with this process is no longer on the table. So at this point, we're just focusing on the comprehensive plan, and then the zoning chapter update will follow the comprehensive planning process. Next, I want to talk a little bit, we haven't presented this data yet, but I wanted to talk just a little bit high level about some of the community feedback we've gotten all along in the process. So 5,700 website visits, so obviously a lot of interest, 2,500 plus survey responses, and then we've had to this point, 79 public engagement activities. Oh, I'm sorry, this is just phase one. I apologize. Yeah. So that was just phase one. So obviously there's more engagement since then, including over the last several weeks, getting you to version 2.0. But so for phase one, we did have 2,506 survey respondents. So the respondents in general reflect Evanston's population by race and ethnicity. As far as age breakdown, you'll see that 18% were under age 24, 24% between 25 and 44, 30% between 45 and 64, and then 28% 65 and above. So 42% of the respondents were under the age of 45, and then 58 above the age of 45. Evanston Cradle to Career, we actually had 658 Evanston Cradle to Career respondents, and all wards were represented in the survey. So just some variety of opinions on how our survey respondents would like to see Evanston grow in the next 20 years. So areas for improvement: housing, affordability, equity, and economic development. And then some very positive things that people love about Evanston: parks, green space, our lakefront, the walkability, access to Chicago, arts and culture, and the neighborhood/local vibe. So as far as housing particularly, broad dissatisfaction with housing now and even less confidence in the future. So only 52% of our survey respondents agreed that Evanston has housing that meets their current needs, and approximately 46% didn't feel like in the next 20 years there will be housing that will meet their needs. So just some more demographics on the housing. So only 33% of Black residents feel Evanston meets their housing needs. Older residents are more satisfied than younger residents. Only 40% of Hispanic/Latino respondents feel Evanston meets their housing needs. And then 1st and 7th wards agree more than 5th and 8th wards about housing needs. Just some data there. So some insights on community vibrancy and economic opportunity. 44% of respondents agree that downtown Evanston feels vibrant and is an enjoyable place to walk, shop, and meet friends. 57% agree that Evanston has shops, restaurants, and services that meet their needs. Obviously not as high a number as we'd like to see. White respondents disagreed most. Hispanic, Latino, Black, and Asian respondents agree more, and younger people agree more. So that's some data. Now I want to get into what you're looking at tonight. So just wanted to talk about the organization of version 2.0 compared to version 1.0 that we'll call them. So November 5th, when we originally released version, we'll call it 1.0, the table of contents, I'm not going to read all of them, but you can see how it was structured. And then the February 21st version that you just received incorporates additional chapters as requested by the Land Use Commission and restructures kind of the document to be more inclusive of the comments and feedback that we've received. On this next slide, I'm going to highlight the specific changes though. So new chapters that were added, an introduction chapter, what we heard and vision statement, community systems, health and well-being, an implementation chapter, and then a couple of appendices. Appendix A for public engagement. We have a lot of public engagement data. We actually have that available on slides tonight, but it ties in with some of the data that I presented earlier, but there's even more data. And so that'll be an appendix to the final plan. And then also just some other supporting data that we have. And then we're working heavily, you've probably seen it in the version 2.0 to make sure we're getting our correct citations. So new chapter names, some of the chapter names changed. So future land use strategy is now Evanston Today plus Evanston Tomorrow. Land use is now called Neighborhoods and Places. Transportation is now called Getting Around. Parks and Open Space is now called Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. And then placemaking, arts, and culture is now Arts and Culture, Community Building, Placemaking, and Connection Making. And then we do have 4 chapters that we haven't changed as far as title goes: environment, housing, economic development, and preservation. So obviously not going to go through all of the changes. That's what we're looking for your feedback on and the public's feedback as we go through the process for the second version. But I do want to highlight some major changes at a high level. So we added metrics and data on existing conditions, added the new chapters that I just described, focused more on people and place, We balance neighborhood preservation with strategic opportunities for new development. We significantly streamlined the transportation chapter. We worked with our sustainability team to strengthen our CARP connections, so that's our Climate Action and Resilience Plan connections. And then we updated maps, photos, and figures. Do you want to talk about some input that's not included in the plan? So one-off or consistent suggestions, so recommendations to remove the environment chapter as an example. Specific names, proposals, plans, groups, or even city departments. These change from time to time, and this document should be evergreen. So we're not sure how much of that will change in the next 20 years. So we want to be wary of locking ourselves into specific items that we refer to today, and make sure that we're mentioning them in essence, but not necessarily by name. And then initiatives or policies that are in the works but not yet finalized. These are often referred to in concept instead. However, as we go through the discussions, one of the things on the implementation of the plan will be opportunities in the future to review the plan, certainly looking at it annually, but then also amendment processes going forward. So as we grow and develop, as new initiatives come forth, we will have those opportunities to incorporate that into the plan. So that is our presentation. And thank you for listening to me. I have my robust team, or not, I shouldn't say we have our robust team of staff here to answer questions, and we're looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you. Now, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that Commissioner Johnson has joined us. With that, kind of initial questions of staff or thoughts from any of you about the plan document? I know it's kind of new. This side?
I mean, are we getting into the document now?
You don't have to. I think at this point, that would be a little later. I think at this point, it's kind of an overview of where we are, general comments on the document, but I don't think we need to get into specifics because we want to hear from the public. So, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thanks. So my question is about this amendment process real fast. This is something I've been wondering. I understand a comprehensive plan to be something that happens every 20 to 25 years. And I've been wondering, regardless of the timeline, what the plan looks like once whatever gets passed, is that the fact that you mentioned an amendment process makes me wonder. I kind of understood it to be that the gate's closed and then we look again in 20 to 25 years. But are you saying there are opportunities even after the plan has passed to revisit elements? Are there sort of restrictions on what could become an amendment? I would just love to learn more about that.
Absolutely. So the plan does talk a little bit about this in the implementation chapter. What would be envisioned is that city staff would work with the Land Use Commission on an annual basis to essentially establish a work plan of items for the year that would be the focus. So that would be an annual process that we could look at. In addition, I think we've talked about an administrative process. So for example, let's say the community decides to add an additional historic district down the road. That's not something that necessarily needs a formal amendment process, but it would be something that would be administratively integrated into the plan, just so that it's showing the most current information. And then one of the things that this plan does that I don't think historically the city of Evanston has really focused on is a 5-year check-in. So this gives an opportunity for us to revisit some of the metrics that have been outlined in the plan, some of the demographic and kind of workforce information that is there, see how we're trending in terms of what the data is telling us. We can also look at emerging trends that are happening that may be outside of our control or that hadn't been thought of when this plan was put in place. So really, you should think of the comprehensive plan as a living, breathing document that we're actively revisiting on an annual basis to identify what we've implemented, in addition to assessing it on a 5-year basis and making sure that it's still tracking with our needs as a community.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question?
Certainly.
On this? So I can imagine there's a balance there between wanting to check in and not wanting to create a ping pong effect where every year. So how extensively does that apply? For example, if we decide to adopt a more conservative approach to upzoning and then we have a huge influx of population, do we get to go back in a few years and say, actually, let's upzone more, or vice versa? We upzone a lot and then we feel like, oh, we changed our minds. We get to back that off. How far does this go with this idea of amending and living?
I would say that where the contemplation of changes will really be outlined as part of the zoning ordinance, there would be specific standards for reviewing the comprehensive plan and what would be eligible for that 5-year assessment. So that's a future conversation that we'll have as part of the zoning code ordinance in terms of outlining that process and what is acceptable or not to the community. So I don't want to speculate on what that would be at this time, but I think that's what we're aiming towards in the future, to provide that predictability on what those 5 years assessments would look like.
So I have one thing I wanted to ask you is, let's assume the plan is passed and agreed upon, and we have a brand new plan. Along the lines of what we do next, I want a little more detail on, do we set up, for example, tactics and strategies and then review them on a biannual basis with council or with other commissions? Because it seems to me a 5-year look back is great, because I think you need to do that and some things take a while to percolate. But if you're doing things like, say, you're going to invest in more money in parks or whatever it is that I'm picking an example, that takes a period of months to get, maybe a year to get, and then to do. So we need to figure out a way to keep our council focused and engaged, at the same time create a reasonable expectation. So I was curious about how that staff looks at that.
Yeah, I think the best example that we have of this is the city's climate action and resiliency plan. They issue an annual work plan that does go with the support of the Environment Board. It travels to City Council and they acknowledge that work plan for the year. So this is something in partnership with the Land Use Commission staff would work on and then present to Council. And then ultimately it will take the responsibility of whoever is partnering on implementation activities associated with that annual work plan to see them through.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to be early. I wanted to wait. But I did get a chance to go through this whole thing. And I have to say that even though I have a lot of comments, I thought it's much improved. So kudos. I think the look of it for sure, but the information that's in there, much better organized, easier to read, just more there. I think it's great. And I think what this has set up now is a format for getting into the details. Whereas before, when on the first draft, there were so many big issues, I think, that we were talking about, well, this isn't here and this isn't here. And I think generally speaking, although I'm sure there's some missing things, it's a good model to use. But I did have several, I think, general comments. And this goes to Commissioner Miracek. Actually, you have brought up on many occasions that this plan, you know what I'm going to say, this plan should have measurable goals. And they're not in there. At least that I saw, something to say that, okay, in 5 years when we review this again, we've achieved this, or we're halfway there, or, whatever it is, depending on the issue, it's going to be a different type of goal. But I wondered, are you planning on, adding those, or?
I would say we will yield to your direction. My thought process would be that is something that likely goes beyond the purview of the Land Use Commission to solidify all of those various targets.
Yeah.
So a potential approach that the Land Use Commission could recommend would be incorporating some policies or actions to actually develop those metrics and targets that could then be integrated into the plan.
This isn't really my issue. This is Commissioner Miracek's have brought this up several times. Could you elaborate on why you think this is important and exactly what should be in here?
Well, I was going to make similar comments, but I was trying to keep silent for the moment and talk about this later. Yes, I still think, like you, that there are let's call them numbers or metrics that should be clearly defined and we have to have a goal. I will point one thing, for instance, in the new draft, there is something, let's call it mentioned, or it's twice and it is on the tables, for instance, density. So density is a very good parameter, but there is no metrics like a goal for the density. And the reason why is that now in the draft, we don't have a number for the expected population in the period for the plan. Before we had something like 85,000 people. Now even this number is not in the draft. So this is an example how the metrics and the goals should be somehow added to the plan. And this is really important. And it's not only for the density and for the population, it's many of them that could be added, and you're absolutely right, as goals in the metrics.
As far as our purview, I would actually love to see another plan that has addressed this, another city, so we'll have an idea of what we're talking about. And maybe we're being maybe we're being unreasonable about asking for this. I don't know exactly. But when it was mentioned before, I thought it was a good idea. So I wanted to bring it up again. Other thing is, a lot of this is aspirational, and it should be aspirational. But what I think is missing is that there's, for every pie in the sky, yeah, we need to do this, there's an effect of that needs to be balanced with the goal. And I'll because this is being discussed at the council right now, I'll bring up healthy building ordinance. It sounds great. Let's make all the buildings, zero energy and zero carbon and all that stuff. But it's money. It costs money. And the result of that goal is that rents are going to be just sky high, because the people that own the buildings are going to have to pay to do this. So there's several things that I've noted in here where it's like, okay, well, this sounds really good, but let's also at least bring up, on the other hand, this has to be considered too, because I think that's just as important as having purely aspirational stuff. Next item. And I don't think we brought this up before, but the new Northwestern Stadium, as much as we've talked about it here, is not mentioned in here. The fact that we're going to have concerts, and there's going to be traffic, and there's going to be, other things associated with that, noise, whatever. And I just find it odd, because there's other facilities that the city has. I mean, this is a Northwestern facility, but I think it's so public that it's a little bit different than a Northwestern classroom. And I just think, and it's not only the 7th Ward that's impacted in a big way, but actually the whole city, because of bus routes and truck routes and all the other stuff. So I think it's something that I don't think we mentioned before, but I think it's worth putting in. I've talked before about this word character. That seems to be, it is in this plan a couple of times, but it's not in the vision statement. And I think what makes Evanston is its character. And to not have that in the vision statement seems to be, it's just not right. So I would suggest that be added to at least to the vision statement. Affordable housing. I think that what I heard, getting back to this, what we heard chapter, what I heard in all these citizen comments was that, and from professionals, that adding the density is not automatically increase affordable housing. That's a fact, I think. And so that statement is nowhere in the document. And lastly, I also heard from pretty much, definitely the majority, and certainly the majority of all the residents who live in R1 and R2 districts, that they do not want upzoning. Do not. Clear as a bell, do not. And if we're going to talk about what we heard and this is a citizen generated document, I found, actually, believe it or not, I found 10 instances, 10 in this document that although maybe not directly say that the 4 flats, 3 flats was taken out, but there's 10 instances where it says, well, yeah, we should have more density everywhere. That's not what people are saying. So I think that was made very clear. And if we're going to listen to the residents, that should be in there. And that's all I had for now.
Any other thoughts at the moment? Sure.
Well, let me just finish with some of the comments. I also join Commissioner Halleck. I would say bravo or kudo to everybody that worked on the draft. It's really better. And it's really better structured and has much more things that are, let's call it, true and definitive. What I would add and what I would, let's say, wish is a couple of things. A little bit, I think that it becomes longer and longer to read. And that's why maybe some of the things seem, let's call it, a little bit watered, or I don't know the exact word to use. But I believe it will be more successful if it's shorter. And as an example, I will tell you that, and you know it better than me, the 2000 comprehensive plan of Evanston had only 4 chapters. Now we have 15. The thing is, if you try to make it a little bit better structured, I would say even better structured, because it's already better structured than the previous one, you will probably make it concise and stronger, because it will be easier to read with much more stronger goals, policies, better defined, and this will bring certain things to the plan. The other thing which is connected to this is, in several instances, I found that there are, let's call it certain, I call them vague things that are sometimes contradictory one to another. I will give you one example. For instance, page 33, there is something that says developing a wide range of housing types and sizes to meet our community's diverse needs. If you think a little bit, how will this be implemented? Who will make the types and sizes? Is this the developer? Is this the city? Or it will continue to be the task for architects and other people in the process? So once again, I don't say that it is a kind of a wrong. It's really vague. It has to be formulated much, much better. I understand what is meant behind the words, but it has to be strongly and better defined in a comprehensive plan. Then the other thing about the data, and I'll finish with that, it is, once again, going back to the goals, it's not only the numbers, for instance, and I go back to the density parameter and to the population things, but we still do not have the projection, I would call it, not only for number of population, number of housing units, but we still need this more detailed structure of household, number of households, and projection, what it will be after 25 years. I know it's very difficult, but there are reliable sources that could be used for that. And the perspective or the projection of a plan, comprehensive plan, is as much important as the basis that it started from, the existing condition. We have to have a concept, including in numbers, what it will be after 25 years. No matter how, let's say, many variables could be, we have to have a projection, a prognosis in the plan. These are my general notes. Thank you.
No, the only thing is that it used to have, the very beginning of it, this plan, it was said that Evanston's going to increase the population 8,000 people. And everybody said, well, where did that come from? You know, and so it was taken out. And I actually think that's a good thing because who knows? If you look at historically, if you look at the last 10 years, I think, we really haven't grown in population. So why would you think that all of a sudden the population is going to increase? I don't know. And so I guess I agree with you, but I don't think that, this plan should assume that there's a population increase.
I didn't say that it will have a population increase. I said that we have to have a prognosis how many people will live in Evanston at that time. It could be the same number like now, and you are right, because currently we have something like population that is stable. And my assumption is that it will not grow with the same amount of people like it was in the 80s and 90s, because over there we have the curve that goes really up. But after that, it's a kind of goes almost constant. So still, I believe that we have to have some prognosis for that.
So,
Commissioner Johnson, I think, has.
Okay, I'll
like
admit
to
I
add.
was the one that asked for the population projection to be taken out. There might have been some concurrence on that, but as far as I remember, a couple meetings ago, I was the one that requested that it be removed. And really the reason why I asked for that is because, you know, just like we heard about not pointing to specific city departments because those names might change, my reasoning was to take that population forecast out because it seemed to be highly inaccurate. And all due respect to the people at CMAP that come up with those population projections or those forecasts, there was a disconnect as far as that tremendous amount of growth forecasted in my mind versus the kind of the realistic amount of growth that we could expect in a place like Evanston, in a mature, built-out community like Evanston. And just some, you know, quick and dirty numbers, that Evanston's had a stable population for about 75 years. And so this 8,000 people that are going to move into this town, it didn't seem right demographically to me, particularly in the context of, you know, Evanston dropping a population about 8% in the 90s, then rising back up to 78,000 people where it sits today. If we look at the broader context in this region, you know, the Chicago MSA population is shrinking to stable. The population of Illinois has been dropping since 2010. We hear a lot about that in the media and in the news. Population of the Chicago metropolitan area is dropping. It has been for about the past 5 years. And the population of Chicago, the city, has been dropping, as we know, for 70 years. So it just didn't square with me as far as this demographic forecast coming out of CMAP, that this may be the best forecast that they can make, but it just didn't seem like there was a high degree of accuracy to it, projecting out 20 years. So just for the sake of, let's not put something in the plan we think the population growth is going to be somewhere from here to here. If we can't be from here to here, let's not put it in the plan. And that's the reason why I asked to have it taken out.
I think the reason why that's important is because of when we get into zoning, this whole thing about density, increasing the density in certain areas. I mean, I spoke about R1 and R2, but the density issue applies to all the areas. And it's what the assumption behind we got to be more dense. We got to have higher buildings. We got to have, you know, whatever. It's based on this idea that all of a sudden there's going to be these floods of people coming into the city. And I don't see any evidence of that. So.
can I?
Go ahead.
So I know I'm brand new tonight, and I'm still getting up to speed on some things as it relates to Evanston. That said, I work in housing mostly, and so I just want to say a couple of things from the housing perspective. There's been a lot of good points raised on this question of, will upzoning create more affordable housing? In the housing world, affordable housing means it's subsidized. Upzoning isn't about subsidizing, right? So the idea with upzoning is that you're going to create more types of housing. And so, yes, let's say we build a duplex, right? The question of land use is what's the most efficient way to use this parcel of land? So why does it matter if we have more types of housing in our town? If we take a piece of land and we put a duplex on it, 2 sides, or a triplex, 3 units, whatever, and someone doesn't want to have to be a renter and they can't afford to buy a home and they still want to be able to build equity as a homeowner, then having different types of housing that they can purchase creates more opportunities for homeownership at different price points. Are those homes affordable? Not necessarily. Are they still expensive? Yeah. I mean, my neighborhood is surrounded by duplexes that are a lot of money in the 4th Ward where I live as a homeowner. But I do just want to clarify, regardless of what anyone thinks of upzoning, it's not about affordable housing. It's about creating different types of housing that create different options. And it's not just for people who want to become homeowners. It's for older people maybe who are ready to downsize and don't want to live their community and don't maybe want to end up in one of the big, you know what I'm trying to say, like one of the big buildings. It's also for people whose children maybe want to come live here and can't afford to buy a home at the prices they cost here and want something else. So I do want to clarify that point. I would also ask when people come to speak about character, this is not a loaded question. It's going to sound like I'm being a jerk, and I mean it really sincerely, which is just, I would really like to understand what people mean when they're concerned about preserving the character. Like, are you concerned about the architectural, like, distinctions that make this place unique and the Preservation Committee works to preserve? Are you concerned about density in your neighborhood? Are you concerned about parking? Like, for me, hearing some specificity around this notion of character would be very helpful. I'd really appreciate it. I'd also like to say, this question of building and growth, a couple of things. There is a lot of research and data that shows that in hot markets like Austin, for example, if you build more rental units, so now we're not talking about home ownership, we're talking about apartments. If you build things for rent, maybe those units will still be expensive, but it will slow, or in some cases stop, the rate at which rents increase. So when you think about this nation right now and the fact that we have a housing crisis in numbers that we have never seen, more people are unhoused than we have ever seen in this country, and the things we are talking about will not fix that at all. But when you think about people who are working and who are having to stretch their incomes farther, in housing, what we define as affordable is 33% of your income usually, right? So keep it simple. You're earning $100. You want to spend 33 of it on your rent and your utilities. In the United States, if you're above that, in housing research, we say you're cost burdened. And then we say if you have to spend more than 50%, more than $50, you're severely cost burdened. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can get them. But the number of people in this country who are cost burdened or severely cost burdened, imagine spending 50% of your income just to cover your housing and trying to make everything else work with what you have left, is higher than anything we have ever seen. And so yes, the comprehensive plan is certainly about looking to the future. It is, for sure. But take a second, and this may not apply to all of you, but if you think about people you know who say, I would love to live in Evanston, but I can't afford it, or I don't know how much longer I can stay in Evanston, right? We are also thinking about, this is also an opportunity just to think expansively about how to deal with people who are already here and suffering. And research shows, and I don't have a stake in this, the research just shows that when you build more rental housing, you can stop the rate at which rents increase. So I do want to make that point. On the question of demographic trends, I've done no research on population growth. But I know that to the extent that people are moving, which is hard to do in the current interest rate environment, but to the extent that people are moving, they're moving to places like Evanston. They're moving to communities that have opportunity. They're moving to places that have good universities, that have functioning public schools, that have good jobs, that have community and are appealing, that have places like the lake. So to the extent that we're going to see population growth in the future, it's going to be in places like Evanston. And the demographics are shifting. And building more also gives us an opportunity to deal with that.
So,
Drush?
We've talked a lot about affordable housing in the past several weeks. And I agree with you that you just don't build more and then have it be affordable. It's going to be very expensive. But there are ways of building affordable housing, and subsidized projects are a huge part of it. I just looked through glanced through the section on housing, and it does say there's a paragraph on soaring housing costs, but maybe we should spend a little bit more effort in the housing section just to talk about, how we address this affordability. And I mentioned before that I would love to see a group of people get together and hash this out. Just put them in a room and have developers, people that really know, finance people, lawyers, how to build affordable housing, because it keeps coming up. But I don't see anything in this that says we're going to do this to solve it. So.
Well, I think absent subsidy, which none of us are going to talk about, then one thing we can do is at least stop price increases where we can.
Well, I don't see how you stop price increases, because it's the market. The market is the market.
I think let's let Jarush comment, and I think I'd like to bring this part of the discussion.
I'm from the real estate space, and I can tell you the buy pressure and the rent pressure in Evanston has never been as high as it's been before, and it's happening because of variables that we don't have control over, like having had a period of years where you had financing at 2-3%. So people who put mortgages on their homes that would normally sell are choosing not to sell. So you have a loss of inventory that drives that up. When you look at the housing, the tax benefits of development, you see that people are building rentals more than they're building condominiums, because rentals can survive a downturn in the market just by turning the rents down if you have to. Whereas building a condominium, you get in a down market, you can get slaughtered. So you're not seeing construction the way you used to see back 15 years ago for that reason. And when you have large amounts of buildings going up without population change, it tells you that the household structure is changing in ways where you have homes now, like with a client, I was saying, listen, don't look at the third floor. It's free. You're not using it. You're not going to put 7 kids in this house, are you? No, I'm having 2 kids, but I got 7 bedrooms. Well, that's just free space for you then, because you're never going to use it. You just store your suitcases up there. The point being that the housing stock we have right now is not in sync with the family size. So, and the land prices have gotten so high for land that if you say, well, let's build smaller homes, your land to cost ratio is out of whack. So it's very difficult. It's a very difficult problem. And last thing I want to say is that if we want to do affordable housing, from a rental standpoint, I don't share the view with you that in this marketplace you could build your way to a lower rate. You'd have to build so many units to drive this town. The demand pressure is so high for Evanston and the North Shore and the North Side of Chicago. I've never seen anything like this before. And so you'd have to build a lot of units. And I don't think that's what we want. We don't want to have 6,000 apartments in downtown Evanston to drive the average, or 1,000 or whatever the number would be, but it's a lot. So I would say that we need to think carefully about our design plans for building high rises and think about how we can do it affordably, but the market's going to tell you it's not likely.
I don't think we should build at all. I just think the demand shows.
Okay. I'd like to kind of bring this part of the conversation to a close so that the public has a chance to weigh in. But one thing I think I want to talk about is, and I agree that this draft is far superior to the first draft, and I think it's something we can work with. But I'd also like to point out that we're not just talking about affordable housing. We're definitely not talking about zoning, because those conversations will have to happen at a later point. But there are, lots of chapters, on dealing with land use and housing and parks and recreation. And one of the really purposes of a comprehensive plan is to lay out all of those issues and chapters and discussions. And I think one of the things that is clear to me in looking at the draft that's before us is there are a lot of competing priorities. And one of the things that the council will have to do and the community will have to do over time is to continue to discuss what those priorities are and how they interplay. So I think, getting your perspective and your initial reaction to the draft plan, and particularly identifying issues that where, there's language in there that still kind of carried over from the 1.0 draft that I think there's pretty much consensus that it ought to be changed. So trying to identify what's are the issues with the current language will be really important moving forward. And I think that being said, one of the things we want to talk about moving forward is kind of what a reasonable schedule would be, and clearly trying to have something. We can't vote on this tonight. We wouldn't want to because the community hasn't had a chance. None of us have had a chance to really digest what's in the plan. So I'd like to kind of, think through what potential meeting dates could be, because clearly we need to hear from the public. One of the things I've asked for is that the boards and commissions that provided input on the various chapters of this plan have a chance to review this document and provide input, which I understand is, they have been asked to do that already. And over the course of the next month, we should be able to get information from them. And I think, just to be perfectly clear, this document is not going to be completed and finished by April 1st. So that's kind of clear, because this is the community's document and it has to be reflective of the community, and there's got to be consensus that this, the policies, even though some of them are going to compete. I mean, we want to have affordable housing, but you don't want to lose the character of Evanston. I mean, there are a lot of different competing priorities. With that said, I've kind of talked to staff and about a potential schedule, and again, subject to change and commissioner availability. So our next meeting is March 12th rather, which hopefully will give everyone an opportunity to read the plan and really digest its contents. So that's a regularly scheduled meeting. And then the proposal would be maybe to try to have a special meeting on March 19th. What's commissioner availability look like? I mean, you don't have to comment now, but if there are issues, it looks like a couple of people have issues. So that's a tentative meeting would be, and then maybe trying to get input from the public and boards and commissions by April 4th, particularly if we can have kind of specificity, as much, if you can identify specific language in the draft plan that is problematic, then, staff can kind of work through alternate changes of language. And then we have we have cases to hear on our regular meeting nights. Would April 16th be possible as a special meeting? And then also, again, tentatively April 30th to complete the work on the plan. So it could be sent off to the city council. Does that seem reasonable? I think we can kind of reconfirm availability, because obviously if commissioners can't make those meetings, it doesn't make sense. Or alternately, if it turns out that we don't have the feedback we need for, if there are questions and additional material that needs to be incorporated into the plan, that timeline might need to slide a little bit, but we're not going to know that, I don't think we know that tonight, but we should moving forward.
Jane, Jane?
Yes.
The other thing we've talked about is that how do we get into this? Do we do it? When we did the first round, the first draft, I think we went page by page or chapter by chapter at least. And so to me, and I think it's beneficial to the residents to know, tentatively that we're going to address, I'm just making this up, chapter 1, 2, 3, in 1 week. And then if we have time, we'll go a little bit further than that. But at least don't, I hate to have a meeting when somebody stands up and talks about chapter 12 and chapter 1 and chapter 6. And that's seeming chaos to me. So.
Okay. And then I think we need to, what's really going to be helpful. I mean, we want to hear from all of you who are here tonight to speak in person, but to the extent that you can provide written comments for staff as to what sections need more work, that's going to be helpful for not only the commission, because we get all of the public comment that's submitted. It doesn't just go to staff. So I think it'll help in organizing and trying to produce a document that really reflects Evanston and Evanston's values. So, and I think does that sound like a plan? Does staff have any kind of comments on that moving forward, or what would be most helpful to staff to help produce the kind of document that we can all be proud of and support?
Chair Lindwall, may I ask a question? Do we think that we will have some maps with the comprehensive plan? Because I read in some of the comments that maps are not needed, but I would say that I would prefer to have maps. Maybe not so many like before, but I think they are needed in a comprehensive plan.
Good evening. Thanks. Alison Leipziger, Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs Manager. If you could be specific about what maps you would like, that'd be helpful. I mean, we do have, I think 5 or 6 in the plan. If there are some that, that you wanted to see, that would be good to know. The issue is, that we'll have to go back to council to ask for a change order, to continue working with the consultant. So right now, the plan is that we would provide essentially text edits, like we talked about a few weeks ago, essentially in a Word document, red line. But right now, we do not have an open contract with a consultant. We've completed that to give you this document.
But you do have in-house GIS, so if there are specific maps, even if they're not formatted like they would be in a document, that would be possible to produce?
Yeah, they wouldn't be beautiful, but they'd be maps.
I think
That's fine.
I think for
That's
the
fine.
purposes of moving the project forward, that would be what we would want. I mean, I don't think any of us are looking for a revised, cleaned up, formatted document, but we do need to have the information that's, that's needed to make informed choices
Right.
about
And we
what
would
the
just need
plans-
clarity around what, I mean,
Okay, we
yeah,
can
not
work
just
on
maps,
that.
but what maps,
Yeah.
right?
Forgive me, but are you talking about zoning maps?
No, we were talking about
No.
the maps that are included in the comprehensive plan document. For right now, there's a future land use map, which is very general, as future land use maps ought to be. There's also a map showing the preservation districts at the end, and I think there's one on transportation. And I don't remember
And
what
then
the others.
schools.
Schools.
Yeah. And parks.
Parks. So just
Of existing conditions?
of existing conditions.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer your question very bluntly about what we need, clarity on timeline and clarity on text changes. That's how we can be successful.
I think George's idea about taking this plan and chopping it up and setting up meetings that are geared so that people coming in are better prepared, we're focused, and we won't be here till crazy hours at night trying to,
Okay.
yeah.
What, I think then what we should try to do is schedule the 2 March meetings that we're planning to maybe cover the first half of the plan at one and the second half of the plan at another.
I think that seems really reasonable, Chair and Commissioners. I think that keeps the conversation focused and allows us to be specific with the changes that you're all recommending. One thing that I found very, very helpful, the Chair dedicated quite a bit of time sitting down with staff and actually walking through page by page her review of the draft. I would welcome you all to do the same thing. Staff is here to support you in this process. So if it would be helpful for us to meet with you individually to kind of review your comments, we can compile those so that the public and all of your fellow commissioners get everybody's feedback. Again, this needs to be transparent and an open process, but sometimes being on the dais and going page by page is not always the most productive and practical. And so I would welcome and offer that opportunity to anyone that would like to take it. And, you know, we've gotten some amazing feedback from the public as well, where they've dedicated that time to go line by line through, which we absolutely appreciate. So I think that's really where we're at in this stage. We don't want to get into a process of circular drafting over and over again. So as much as we can be specific moving forward, we would appreciate it.
I agree. I agree with you. I think that's a great idea to give it to you beforehand, and then you can put it in, and then everybody can review. However, does that eliminate comments at the meeting? No, it doesn't. Okay. All right. Because there'll
Absolutely
be
not.
people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
and-
Yeah. I think, you know, you're going to continue to get feedback, it sounds like, at the 2 meetings in March. So your
Just gives us
thoughts
a head
may
start.
be able to evolve as you're thinking. But again, we want to be able to set you up for success in April with having kind of detailed feedback that you all can vote on and come to consensus on, and then give staff the direction we need to incorporate it into a red line version for your vote.
And that being said, I would encourage the public, you can give us comments on any section that you want in any order that you want. And we'll make, you know, staff will make sure that that gets incorporated into the appropriate, you know, discussion. And even if you know, if we're talking about the first 6 chapters on the 12th, and, you know, we get then your comments that, you know, after that, they'll still get reflected in what we ultimately see when we're having our more detailed discussions in April.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it would be helpful, I think, to give us the Word document so we could put in our comments.
We absolutely can send individual Word documents to each one of you. We won't be able to send you all one collective Word document that you're all working on. But we can certainly give you individual versions for you to
There's an
mark up.
Open Meeting Act issue, and
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
we're not doing a Google Doc. Okay.
Can we get a date then? A date and then this stack of chapters?
I would suggest, sorry.
Oh, thank you. I would say that I agree with what Commissioner Halleck mentioned earlier. I think we should do it maybe 2 to 3 chapters per meeting, and then maybe spend a lot of time on chapter 10, which involves housing. Take like basics, you know, smaller chunks, allow the public to review it. I know that March, as far as Evanston School District, there is a spring break, so people may be away the week beginning, I guess, with the 24th, I believe is the week of spring break. So take that into consideration.
You know, go ahead.
Scheduling questions. The additional meetings that you mentioned, are these in addition to our regular second and fourth Wednesday?
Yes, they would be.
Okay. And do we, because we talk about, are there cases?
Yes, there are
Okay.
cases coming your way, and they're big cases coming your way that are going to command your regular schedule for a while. So I would caution you. You can do what you want. I'm not trying to drive the timeline or schedule. But there's a giant workload coming for you, in addition to staff, just with regular business, starting at your regular meeting at the end of March.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, people come to this commission because they want to propose to build things, and we want to review those things.
We have a legal obligation by city code to review them on a certain timeline.
Good, thank you for the reminder. And then last question about the scheduling is the special meetings, are we going for 6 p.m.?
We can discuss that. I would suggest that's probably the best.
Okay.
But that again is up to my fellow commissioners.
If it's 6, I'll be 10 minutes late, but that's.
Oh, okay, well, yes.
Possibly the same also.
All right, well then maybe we'll have to kind of revisit the timeline. I would suggest, in the interest of not having this process extend into, June or July, which probably would be the case if we try to just limit it to 2 or 3 chapters. We see how it goes, and if we need additional time to review, then we can add meetings or, lengthen the timeline. But, again, it depends on how extensive, what needs to really change. And we'll know a bit more after we listen to the community.
So these meetings are not, they're noticed, but they don't have to be, do they have to be noticed? Like, we will review chapters 1, 2, 3? No. So what you just said is correct. Like, if it takes longer, it takes longer, and we don't get through it. But yeah, okay.
Does that give staff what direction they need with respect to the timeline? Okay. With that, I think we're ready to hear from the public. And I'll just start calling names. First on my list is Sarah Friedman, followed by Scott Roberts, rather. Oh, and Julia Forgash. And I would say each person gets 3 minutes. So.
Hello. I'm a first-time witnesser at the LUC, so thank you very much for taking the time. I recognize, Commissioner Linwell, that you've asked that we not discuss zoning, but Commissioner Halleck has made a comment about, first off, I should say I'm Sarah Friedman, and I'm a 6th Ward resident. Commissioner Halleck, you made a comment about folks in my area of Evanston largely not being a fan of upzoning. And I want to be here to represent the folks who are a fan of upzoning and who are very much in support of upzoning. I'm here tonight because the comprehensive plan, second draft, very impressive in terms of what's shifted, how it's organized. I really appreciate the work and the effort that our city has put into this. I'm also here because I strongly support allowing more housing options in our neighborhoods, including multifamily homes in areas currently zoned as single family only, such as my own. Our city's known for being welcoming and diverse, and by committing to making more options for housing available throughout Evanston, we position our neighborhoods to be more flexible and to meet the needs of the people going forward. And I feel like it's important to point out, I was surprised by the pushback on zoning in particular, but kind of on the shock and surprise of this comprehensive plan overall. And I started talking to my neighbors in the last 4 weeks. I've invited many of my neighbors into our home to talk about zoning in particular. We've supported 14 households over a couple of meetings in our home. We've talked about what zoning is. We've talked about what it isn't. We've talked about some of the things we've heard through the media. And also people have brought their questions about what does this mean for developers? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for our neighborhood? And I have, among those 14 households, heard no hesitancy toward the idea of upzoning in the 6th Ward. And I've encouraged those folks to come here as well. Some of them have taken me up on it in different fashions, in person or written. And I'm going to continue to encourage folks to take me up on that. Of the 14 families, 2 of the families are neighbors who have grown children in their 30s, just to give you an idea of the demographics. The other 12 households that I've talked to are very much like my own. We have young kids, a kindergartner and a first grader. This is the demographic that doesn't have a lot of time for late night meetings, these kinds of things. And I'd like you to know that they are supportive of upzoning. Thank you for your time.
Can I ask you a question? Excuse me. Have you seen the physical diagrams of what the upzoning would make your neighborhood look like?
Yeah, yes.
And you're okay with that increased bulk next to a smaller house?
I am okay with zoning creating greater opportunity.
I understand
and more
that,
options.
but it comes down to the what's built. And
Yes.
that's where the rub is, I think. It's everybody likes the idea of,
Correct. Correct.
but-
I moved from Portland, Oregon 2.5 years ago, and we were upzoned massively before we moved. 2plexes, 4plexes, around corners. It was a big change. They were great neighbors, and it was additional housing, which was fantastic for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Let's let the public, maybe can we hold our comments until? All right, next up is Scott Roberts.
Good evening, members of the Land Use Commission. My name is Scott Roberts. My wife, daughter, and I have lived in the 3rd Ward for over 20 years, and I'm here representing the Evanston Say Yes to Duplexes campaign. At your last meeting, Chair Lindwall suggested adding language to the comprehensive plan, recognizing Evanston's single-family homes as a key component of our community identity. While true, I urge you to expand this recognition to include Evanston's duplexes and double houses. Duplexes have been a valuable part of Evanston's character for over a century, predating the residential zoning movement. Our existing zoning laws have shifted away from the diverse housing types that have long enriched our community. My family and I are proud to live in an 1885 duplex designed by the world-renowned Evanston architect Daniel Burnham, founder of the City Beautiful movement. Because we're in an R1 zone, our home wouldn't be allowed to be built under today's rules. Like many other Evanstonians, our duplex's smaller size and more affordable price made moving into our wonderful neighborhood possible for my family. I've attended previous LUC and City Council meetings where I've both spoken and listened to passionate advocates on both sides of zoning reform. I've heard the prospect of larger units used as a wedge to frighten people away from the needed reforms. But nobody's afraid of duplexes. In fact, just today, I saw a scary "you're being upzoned" lawn sign in front of a duplex in an R zone on Judson, which couldn't be built on that spot today under current zoning rules. Evanston loves duplexes. This spring, in fact, a book celebrating Evanston's duplexes titled "Hidden in Plain Sight, Evanston's Double Houses" is being published. It features 42 historic double houses throughout the city. Incorporating language in the comprehensive plan that honors more forms of housing, of homes, aligns with our community's commitment to inclusivity and affordability. It ensures that our city's plan reflects the true diversity of Evanston's housing landscape, paving the way to a future where everyone has the opportunity to call our city home, including teachers, small business owners, young families, seniors, and all the people who make Evanston a great place to live. To reflect our true housing diversity, I propose modifying the statement to recognize Evanston's single-family homes, duplexes, and double houses as key components of the city's community identity. This inclusive approach not only honors our past, but it also sets a foundation for a more equitable and vibrant future without unfairly privileging one housing choice over others. I encourage everyone to visit sayyestoduplexes.org to learn more about Evanston's duplexes and zoning reform. Thank you.
Next up is Julia Forkash, followed by Joshua Howes, Michelle Klebeck, and then Steve Test. Okay.
Hello, my name is Julia Forgash. Thank you for holding this meeting. I've lived in Evanston for 24 years. I currently live in the 4th Ward, bordering the 1st Ward. Overall, I don't see much that is objectionable in the revised draft of Envision Evanston 2045. Most of what is discussed in the document is attractive and I imagine would be appropriate ideas for any future planning for a suburb of a major city. The issue I have is in Chapter 5, the discussion on neighborhoods. I live in the downtown neighborhood. I want to stress the word neighborhood because just like the Dempster Street, Main Street, and Central Street areas of Evanston, downtown is a mix of businesses and residents. Just like the neighborhoods I just mentioned, we have apartments close to the business district, and we have a mix of apartments and houses to the east and a mix of apartments and houses to the west. The downtown neighborhood has metro stops, bus stops, and L stops, just like the other neighborhoods I mentioned. And just like Dempster Street, Main Street, and Central Street, the downtown area has 2-lane roads, not wide thoroughfares. In the Envision Evanston plan, in the paragraphs that discuss the future of development in the different areas of the land use map, the downtown area is the only section that mentions the word high-rise. As long as that word is in there, people in my neighborhood are going to push back. Why should downtown residents be subject to crowding, congestion, and looming concrete structures while other neighborhoods are protected from that? Is it because we already have a few tall buildings? Just because that is true does not mean that we want more of them. Just like the people in the other neighborhoods I mentioned, we value the sunlight and the trees. Just like the other neighborhoods, we want to minimize noise and traffic congestion and maximize safety. We want to be able to walk down the street and admire the historical facades that we know and love in Evanston. If you consider the legacy building that has been approved on Chicago Avenue, plus the proposed development on Davis Street and the proposed development on Maple Street, you will be effectively adding over 1,000 people to a 4-block area. Evanston prides itself on history, authenticity, and access to nature. Giant residential buildings stress our streets, block sightlines to nature, and cast shadows throughout the area. Intermittent light and darkness is what you get when you walk around River North. I don't want to live in River North. I want to live in Evanston. Affordable housing should be our goal. But will the affordable units that these developers of high-rises must commit to actually go to families and the working people of Evanston, or will they go to students who will leave Evanston once they graduate? I just want to be able to walk down the street in my neighborhood and see trees and light and sky. I also want to be able to drive down Davis Street on my way home from work and not consistently get stuck in traffic, mostly due to all the Amazon trucks, moving trucks, and food delivery vehicles that line our two-lane streets. I urge you to listen to the people that live downtown and treat us as you would any other neighborhood. Thank you.
Next up is Joshua Howes. No? Okay. How about Michelle?
Hi there, Michelle Klebeck, First Ward, architect, mom of 2. First, I want to acknowledge the effort that went into incorporating the community feedback over the past few months. I really appreciate the inclusion of provisions focused on preserving existing housing, redeveloping underutilized properties, and revitalizing our downtown. These are steps in the right direction. I believe they should be further emphasized. However, I still have concern about the approach to increasing density. The housing section points to a national housing shortage, but the local data tells a different story. According to the U.S. Census, Evanston's population has slightly declined in recent years, and our residential vacancy rate is 7%, indicating a healthy housing supply. So do we really need a significant additional housing here? Affordability is often cited as a reason for the changes. However, the amount of housing it would take to move the needle would be overwhelming for a small city like Evanston. I think a lot of us who support affordable housing would like to see some ideas that don't involve sending our existing homes into a landfill. Another concern is the potential negative impact on single-family areas. Many of us had voiced opposition to replacing single-family homes with multi-unit buildings. And while these terms were removed from the plan, the language in the plan has shifted more to a broad, vague terms like diversifying housing options and removing restrictions on multifamily housing and examine R1 housing. And while these sound positive, they also seem to subtly suggest that we're still suggesting a sweeping upzoning. Evanston prides itself on its diverse housing options. Single-family homes are one of them. And the families that live in them should be able to have the opportunity to purchase those homes. And they're a key part of the mix. I would like to see clear language in the text that ensures their preservation in R1, R2 zones. Last, I've seen council minutes in the past that list increasing the tax base as a driving force behind these proposals. And if that's the case, I believe that our focus should be on revitalizing our downtown area, targeting mixed-use projects where appropriate that could help generate revenue while also addressing our many empty storefronts. Last, I want to say I don't oppose multi-unit buildings. They're a part of our mix already in Evanston. I used to live in a 2-flat. I liked a 2-flat very much. But as a person who was starting to have kids and a dog and a family, and it was not going to work for us anymore. So that's all I gotta say. I'm not against it. I just realized that that's not the solution for everyone, and we should not be eliminating all of our single-family areas for one housing type. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Steve Test, followed by Jack Weiss and Jeff Smith.
Good evening. Steve Test, 1135 Hinman Avenue. I'm happy that the Land Use Commission removed the controversial and unpopular language in the first plan draft that eliminated single-family home zoning everywhere. I also suggest you ought to take out of a key takeaway under zoning and development, it says examine R1 zoning. So I'd suggest you tell staff to take that out also. I do suggest, however, that you should instruct staff to insert some affirmative language that reflects the wishes of a lot of Evanston residents along these lines. The Evanston neighborhoods whose lots are currently in use for single-family homes should continue to have their preferred and best use as single-family homes. The only exception should be in the case of specific lots identified by the city through a transparent public process with community buy-in and as having the condition, context, and setting to make use as a multi-unit building acceptable, and where the design and construction of that building blends with its surroundings and in fact enhances its neighborhood. The city should survey the neighborhoods, find those lots. I'm sure there's a bunch of them. Get the neighbors to buy into the fact that these would be perfectly acceptable lots. Maybe they're next door to an existing townhome, all that kind of stuff. My other point is I have a lot of comments on this draft. I've sent them all to you. I've only done 2 chapters yet. Got a lot more to go. There are kernels of moderate, careful, strategic steps the city can take that could have significant positive impacts without blowing everything up like some of the more radical land use proposals some are advocating. So I urge you to find those strategic, focused, careful, moderate steps that you can take. Let's amplify those. Let's cut back on the radical, blow everything up steps. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Jack Weiss.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Jack Weiss, Director Emeritus of Design Evanston. We have a lot of work to do on this next version, so let's get to it. In 2023, Councilmember Claire Kelly, along with Kate Sterling and Design Evanston leaders, prepared a draft ordinance that would have created a Community Design Commission. 3 council members supported referral of the draft ordinance to the City Council. However, P&D failed to move the draft forward to the council, anticipating that the concept would become part of the proposed new comprehensive plan. A few weeks ago, the Preservation Commission, in their testimony to you about Envision Evanston 2045, recommended that the concept of a community design commission be incorporated into the revised draft of the comprehensive plan. During last Tuesday's special meeting of the Preservation Commission, Sarah Flax assured us that it would be included in the revised edition. In the newly updated comprehensive plan that we see tonight, a reference to a design review committee does appear in Chapter 3 on page 44, but it lacks the intended emphasis. Feedback from the plan's mention of the design review committee from one Design Evanston leader was, well, that still could be wishy-washy policy administered by a city staff with no design credentials. One planner who was involved with the 2023 draft ordinance said, no idea why this would be unnecessarily watered down. I would have preferred it to say establish a community design commission comprised of resident experts to signify the city's commitment to quality design solutions. A third member said, design review committee is not what was in the referral. The referral is for a community design commission, which is a public legislative body. What is described here in embarrassingly few words sounds no different than the previous DAPR committee, which the City Council voted to eliminate. Closing, I'd just like to urge you to review and strengthen the language on page 44 in the revised plan to ensure that the proposed Community Design Commission be a public legislative body composed of professional designers and related experts. Thank you.
Sir, sir, does Design Evanston plan to submit a specific proposal?
You have my statement.
It's in,
Okay,
we've
thank you.
gotten it
Thank you.
from before things. Next up is Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Commission members. Chairman Lindwall, you probably said the most important thing, both the last meeting and this one, saying that this needs to be a consensus document. It shouldn't be something that passes 5-4 or 6-3. It should be unanimous both here and at the council. So I came here to speak about the process. I think you've laid out a good timeline. I would plan on extending it further. I probably read and write as fast as most people in Evanston, and I've probably spent more time delving into city documents and plans than most. And I've spent days and days just on the housing section. I've got 4,000 words already. If I put it in a red line, you wouldn't be able to read your original document because it looked like it was blood spattered. So 6 weeks ago, I submitted a list of 20 major problems I saw, not the top 20, just 20 that I saw with this plan. And a quick comparison showed that about 17 of them still persist in the second plan. It's a lot nicer. There's a lot kernels of good thoughts. There's verbal nods to things like character without defining it or saying what you'll do about it. There's verbal nods to things like displacement without saying anything about what would be done about it. But the major problems as to premises still exist. Zoning is off the table, but its shadow looms as large over this plan as Godzilla, or the memory of the tower at 708 Church and some of the battles that we've been through. That's one reason why we shouldn't revisit this every 5 years. People are going to make certainty investments, whether they're developers or homeowners in this town. They need to know that things aren't going to change every time there's a new set of rookie aldermen or our fifth city manager in 6 years. A long-range plan should be long-range for that reason. I agree with a lot of the things I've heard. I believe we've got a lot of good spirited people in this town. If we work together, it can't be done in 3-minute bursts. There needs to be more engagement in long, detailed working sessions with groups like Central Street Neighbors, or even just nerds like myself who like digging into things, and when they have to, publishing them on the roundtable because I can't get any other outlet. But, we agree on a lot of things. People are unhoused and cost burden in this country right now, but it's not because of single-family homeowners. It's because we've got more oligarchy and inequality than we've seen since the age of the robber barons. And we're not going to fix that by taking out of the hide or the equity or the retirement savings of homeowners. We've got probably $30 million in equity sitting right here in this room alone. So let's work together going forward. I'll get you my comments. I'll try not to blood spatter everything, but we need to have the time to be able to do a good job to make this work, and I look forward to making that happen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is Dr. A.L. Williams, followed by Pat Mulhern and Jeff Wooten.
Good evening. Dr. A.L. Williams here, 1040 Pittner Avenue, a resident of Evanston for about 55 years. One appreciates this opportunity. My comments in part relate to publishings in the Evanstonian, the Evanston Roundtable, and the National Institute of Health. For a long time, Evanston allowed residents to enjoy their homes in Malou without much interference. Unfortunately, in the last 10 years or so, we have seen us retrogressing in terms of mutual respect for ethnicity and income levels of residents. Per the roundtable, someone associated with planning thinks that the city has a mandate to increase the number of residents, rezone the city to build more multifamily units, thus eliminating spacious properties that people enjoy, thereby eliminating persons, even families, having a particular hue. We did read of some rethinking in the last couple of weeks, but to suggest that Evanston has a problem of not having enough housing for who? Shouldn't we try to better the lives of the current residents of Evanston first, especially those who have supported this town, before creating more congestion, more tension, or unhappiness? Is it really an integral part of Envision Evanston 2045 to be cold and calculated? Are there plans to aid seemingly distraught persons like an European American male a year or so ago sitting on the curb along Green Bay near McCormick? Fortunately, he was helped by EPD. Are there plans to aid military veterans in our midst who may be having difficulty coping? In an ensuing snowstorm about 2 years ago, a distressed African-American mother with a baby covered up in a stroller waited for a bus at Fowler Avenue and Dempster Street. No shelter had space for she in Evanston. She had to be taken to Chicago to find refuge. Are there plans to take care of more distressed mothers or any other human females needing support? Human females are the absolute most significant and advanced beings on the planet, having about 800 or more genes than human males. Rezoning, is that part of a scheme towards gentrification once again, as cited in publications referenced? Sadly, we still have people who do not know that there is only one race of Homo sapiens sapiens and are not aware that all humans have hues of melanin, eumelanin, brown, and pheomelanin, red and yellow pigments. The only humans without the brown are albinos. There is no discernible black pigment other than in hair or white pigment in human skin. We all have neuromelanin even in our brains. Check out the NIH library. Whatever happened to all of those Native Americans who reportedly made Evanston their home? Was rezoning involved? Lastly, one is of the opinion that there have oftentimes been significant European Americans, although in the majority, who have taken decisive actions against inhumane disparities and made a difference. And similar to other significant ethnic Americans, they are compassionate, they embrace their African heritage, and they are intelligent. Keep an eye on the self-serving developers and follow the money. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next up, Pat Mulhern, followed by Jeff Wooten.
Good evening, commissioners and city staff. My remarks will be a little shorter because I think you've made good progress on both fronts this evening. I'm a resident of 1224 Hinman. I always feel compelled to say I am for a comprehensive plan for this city that has a good forward look to it. And I am also for more affordable housing. And one thing we've learned is everybody in this town's for more affordable housing. So an average document came out last weekend of a terrible process and an artificial timeline. What had potential to unite the city, Envision Evanston, is doing what was done on a smaller scale at Ryan Field. It's pitting friends and neighbors against one another. In our neighborhood, we've hosted every night we're hosting meetings with neighbors, and what we're hearing is, a little bit of back and forth. This should be a uniting process, and it might sound odd that to ask a volunteer commission, and thank you for what you do. It's really important, and I think this commission's been the voice of reason here for the last few months. I would ask you to do something you started to do tonight. It is our elected leaders and city staff can't seem to say out loud that the public wants more engagement and the public wants more time. That keeps coming up in every single meeting. And time may be, to Commissioner Linwall, it might be April, it might be May, it might be December. It really doesn't matter. What matters is doing it right, and we can't hear that from our city leaders. I do want to commend this team over here to my left. They've been very accessible. They've been taking a lot of input, as we've heard tonight. They want to hear. What we don't want to hear back is we know better. We want to hear doesn't mean we know better. We want to hear means we're listening to you and we're going to give you feedback. And I also know this is a mighty team over here of 3 or 4 people writing this work for the city without a consultant any longer. And that's not spoken. I don't know why people are not talking about that, but the Land Use Commission is being put under extraordinary pressure. So poor planning in this process, a year ago is resulting in an emergency where Brian said, I got to come in like 6 extra meetings and we're going to get this done by April. This team over here has got pressure on them that doesn't stop. The nonsense that this process really needs to be called out. Let's do it right. That's what the citizens are. No one's coming into this commission saying, blow it up. I think people are saying, take time, do it at the right pace, like you would do in a normal condition. So far, the comprehensive plan is it's envision density. That's what it is. It's envision density, and that doesn't feel good to the neighbors. And nobody asked for that either. I haven't found anybody in the town that said we want more buildings, we want corridors, we want more buildings downtown, we want more buildings on Howard. So I'll wrap up by saying thank you for what you do. Trust and transparency to the residents of the city are on the edge right now. A real plan combined with a real schedule is a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jeff Wooten, followed by Carl Klein and Tori Ray. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Wooten, 1028 Hinman. Just echoing the previous comments, I think the plan has a lot of good intention and a lot of good goals and aspirations. I think it needs more time. I mean, it lays out 7 goals, 76 policies, 322 actions. A lot of those policies and actions are in direct conflict with each other. You've heard some of the comments that they call for more affordable housing by reducing barriers to development, but then they lay out direct requirements for increased review of development and increased rules that have to be met for development. There's some hard choices that have to be made in the plan. I think we have to take the time to consider those areas of conflict and prioritize. More specifically, in terms of the goals, a lot of us have talked about housing, affordable housing. One of the top 7 goals is to increase housing diversity. And I don't understand that as a goal. Why is that the goal? That sounds like an ends to a means to an end and not the goal. If the goal is affordable housing, let's say the goal is to increase affordable housing and not say increase housing diversity. If you look at the chart on figure 5 in chapter 10, we have incredible housing diversity. It's comparable to Chicago and it's higher than all of the other communities that we're compared to. So why is the goal simply to increase housing diversity? That just seems off base to me. Thank you.
Okay, Carl Klein. Yes, what? Probably about 20 or so.
Right.
Okay, Carl.
Good
ahead.
evening. So I came to kind of give you an update, but thank you for providing a tentative schedule and timeline. I'm the chair of the new chair of the Preservation Commission, and currently commissioners from the Preservation Commission are reviewing the updated draft to ensure the recommendations we made are included in the comprehensive plan. We will discuss the updated draft at our regularly scheduled meetings to discuss and comment on preservation-related components of the comprehensive plan. In the meantime, may I remind you that the Preservation Commission presented to you and included a comment letter with recommendations. And so in the meantime, could you please take that into consideration, those recommendations, until we can come back to you with feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tori Ray, followed by Tom Doyle, and then Beth Cherney, I believe.
Hi, I'm Tony Ray. I live at 1611 Chicago Avenue, a high-rise building, and I am here as a representative of the Interfaith Action of Evanston Advocacy Committee. Simply, we want more, our goal is for more affordable housing, and let's all work together for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Doyle.
I actually have a handout for you. So you've got a written version, and I won't read the whole thing.
Oh, good. That's okay.
So my name's Tom Doyle. I've lived in the 9th Ward for about 33 years, and I represent the neighbors on our block. And we're talking about a property located at 1222 Washington Street. I'm going to start on the last paragraph of this letter. And basically what I want you to know is that we live on a uniquely, ecologically, and sociologically highly stressed community. We're different. Our block is carrying a unique burden within a larger township of shouldering the community accommodation of 4 significant institutional properties. From east to west, we can start with the Lydia Home, formerly known as the Rice Center. The Lydia Home provides intensive foster care for between 30 and 40 adolescents. If you want to talk about affordable housing, let's start there. 30 to 40 residents in our neighborhood, ranging in age from 6 to 16 years, with needs from basic to highly acute. The needs of servicing these residents is a 24/7 challenge that results in 911 calls for emergency assistance from the Evanston Police, Ambulance, and Fire Departments many times every month. Last year alone, there were 138 fire emergency calls came to our block to service the Lydia Home. 138. Basically about 3 a week. These 4 high-traffic institutions make up over 50% of. There's a few more. We got a school and we got a church. These 4 and a daycare center. These 4 high-traffic institutions make up over 50% of the land use on our block, all converted to concrete. In some ways, each of these institutions is a blessing, but in other ways, each applies more stress on the block. Nevertheless, we willingly go along with their ever-evolving needs with a great attitude of community spirit. We all purchased our properties knowing these institutions in one form or another existed. When asked, we have accommodated. Now we have learned that the city of Evanston may have already approved, to be very close or close to approving, and let me skip here, a program, a community Partners for Affordable Housing project in collaboration with the Evanston Township High School to place a prefabricated home on the only small vacant lot, which is somebody's backyard that he sold for economic reasons, and now they want to convert it into affordable housing on our block. We're all in favor of affordable housing, But we are respectfully asking that the city put an immediate pause on this project for a lot of the very reasons that have already been stated. We're committed to listening, learning, etc. Let me move forward. We learned of this project just 2 weeks ago. The community needs time and input to evaluate what is in its best interests. We believe in the principles of a community, partners, but the two key words in this program are community and partners. Our neighborhood was completely left out of any collaboration on this matter. And if you look at these projects for affordable housing have been dropped in communities here and there one at a time without the neighbors even knowing they were coming. And that's what's being attempted to do, respectfully, by our aldermen against our wishes. So we're asking for a pause and somehow that we can be helped because we're kind of being told we're SOL on this deal. And we don't believe that right now.
Staff,
Okay.
is this going to come before us?
No.
No.
It's uncertain at this time. We have not received an application for the use. The city council did approve negotiations of the purchase of 1222 Washington Avenue at their last meeting or the meeting before.
February 9th.
Yeah.
I have a question
Day
about
after the
this.
Super Bowl.
If this property hadn't been sold and the owner had built this house, was the house that's proposed, or took the house that the ETHS is building, would that fall under the accessory dwelling unit ordinance?
It would not meet the limitations of the accessory housing ordinance. It has been the lot has been subdivided.
No, I'm assuming if it wasn't, if somebody had this whole thing and they said, I want to put that house there on that part of their land, if it was not subdivided, could they have done it?
They could have added an accessory dwelling unit associated with the lot prior to it being subdivided.
Prior to subdivision.
It wouldn't
Correct.
be compliant. It'd be too big.
The house that is proposed by the high school would be too big. I think what his question is
then it wouldn't. You couldn't then.
Correct. Yes, the house that the high school is building would not
It's-
meet the limitations.
My
of
question leans
accessory.
into your concern because of the fact that if somebody was going to do that inside the existing code, they couldn't. That's kind of where we're going. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
and anyone could have purchased that lot and
Sure.
built a home on it as well.
And I just,
But this is also not on the agenda this evening.
sorry.
So
Yeah.
and it also is not necessarily related to the comprehensive plan, but I think that staff.
Indirectly, but not directly. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Beth Cherney. Did I get it right?
It's actually, well, it should be Cherney, but it's now Cerny because it's been
Oh, Cerny.
butchered.
Okay,
You know,
well,
like when my, like a lot of last names.
And then after you will be Mark Steislinger and then John Kennedy. So
So I'd like to thank everybody for your dedication to the residents of Evanston. This is so important. So my name is Beth Cerny, and I live in the 9th Ward. My neighbors and I were blindsided by the person who was elected to represent his constituents. As we know, preserving native green space is important to the city and to its citizen. The neighbor's backyard at 1222 Washington is in the process of being purchased by the city. This backyard is the only green space on a block that is mostly consist of impervious surfaces due to several large institutions, including a school and the Lydia Center home for children. If purchased, this existing urban green space will be replaced. All of the red that you see on this map is an institution or basically no green space. The only little green space is what we have that I've colored green, and I'm happy to send this to everybody. The neighbors are asking the Land Use Commission to help us put a pause on this purchase. We'd like to have an objective voice to review the situation with a critical eye. We are getting advice from the Natural Habitat of Evanston, Evanston Tree Keepers, Forestry Department, Open Lands. I just was told right before here to reach out to Matthew Cotter, the Environmental Board, and I've also been told to reach out to Steve Ruger, who is usually an advocate for open green spaces. And we need more time to see what's possible. This plan is being put in place by the Evanston administrative staff and the 9th Ward aldermen, even though the green space needs zoning variances for their development plans. We are told that this concern may not make it to your docket. Our street isn't sure if we have a chance to fight this, but we're reaching out in case someone can help us. Thank you.
thank you. Mark Steislinger?
Hello, everybody. I didn't know I was going to be speaking tonight. I just, my wife must have put my name in. I just have a quick question. You know, I'm a single-family homeowner on 325 Greenwood, and I have a six-flat apartment building that I own on Elmwood Avenue. And, you know, and I've heard a lot of people speak, and I sympathize with a lot of their concerns. But I just had one question. Will this, say the zoning, will it ever be put on a ballot that the people of Evanston can vote for? Or is it just the aldermen make the choice, you know? And they vote for it and we don't really get a final say? That's my question.
Okay, well, I'll attempt to answer that, and staff can weigh in as well. But the comprehensive plan, which is what is being considered at the moment, is a broad-based document that includes a lot more than just zoning. And,
Yeah, I
and
understand that.
when the zoning ordinance is considered, there will be community input, there will be meetings. It will come before the Land Use Commission for public hearings. So when those kinds of recommendations, when it's time to consider those, you will have plenty of opportunity to express your concern.
But will we get to vote on it?
Typically, that is not something that the communities vote on. So, you know, it will be the city council that ultimately approves the document. I mean, one of the problems with trying to vote on something like a comprehensive plan or a zoning ordinance is there are so many pieces that, you know, it would be very difficult to write like a referendum question. You know, normally if you're voting on you know, there are rules, and this document is going to be many pages long. So your input will need to be
Yeah, I understand the
public.
input, but the final word is that the aldermen make the decision. We
Yes.
don't really get to vote on it. Right?
I'd like to point out that there is an election in April.
Yeah,
and,
I
and
understand
I
that.
have to imagine that anybody running for alderperson this spring is going to be very clear about their position on this hot button issue. So through representation, you are voting for those people.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is John Kennedy. Welcome, followed by, and then followed by Sarah Friedman, I believe. You already spoke. And then I also have Regina Wooten, who said she doesn't have a comment. Okay, all right, thank you. I just to clean up my list a little.
I'm the last one.
No, you are not the last one.
All right, so I concur with everybody who said great improved plan. Congratulations, staff. But there's still a key missing area, and that revolves around data. I happen to come out of that data kind of area. We do have a new Appendix B, but it's a very macro level. For example, density. All density is, I mean, density seems to be a topic we're talking about. But the density that's in the plan right now is comparing Evanston to a dozen other communities. That's not specific enough. It's not granular enough. We need to drill down and basically identify areas of the city that could absorb more density and those that can't or don't, that it just doesn't work that way. I mean, so what the plan needs is to go down another level. And it might even be by ward or even precinct. I grant you that few residents are going to get down into that detail. But unless you have that base, you can't build up a higher level of policy. And I can tell you that for people that live in a neighborhood, they will look at that data at a granular level. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next three speakers are Juan Espinosa, Sue Lowbach, and Phyllis Nickel. Is Juan?
Oh, do you want to start my timer?
Yes, I will do that.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. Juan Espinoza, 2612 Prospect Avenue. I live in Ward 6. I'm a relatively recent resident of Evanston. My family and I moved here from Los Angeles in May of 2023. Background a little bit about me, just because I think context is helpful, and certainly to put my comments in perspective. I'm a physician. I'm a pediatrician. I moved here to become the chief research informatics officer at Lurie Children's Hospital. So I live and work in data all day, every day. I've heard a lot of comments about data today, so I'd like to speak a little bit about that. But really, what I wanted to say is, I moved here after living 17 years in an area that is zoned very much like the way that this plan describes, and it's great. I had a fantastic experience. It's what allowed my family to buy a home early on. We bought a multi-unit housing where we were able to rent the other units and use the rent plus our income to make it possible for us to afford to live in a better place. We raised our daughters there with our neighbors, with our friends. We had a walkable neighborhood. We had a wonderful, wonderful experience. And so hearing this debate is interesting to me because I've had nothing but 17 years of living in that environment and reaping the benefits of it. So I think I wanted to bring that. I know that some of the commissioners and others had said that they hadn't heard some positive voices. I wanted to bring a positive voice, that this change in zoning can be a good thing. It can be done very well, and that families of all types, of all socioeconomic status, of all backgrounds can really benefit from that, and that communities can benefit from that. The piece that in my last minute, I'll just say is that there's this concern or question about how this changes character. I know Commissioner Berlin had asked for that specificity of what character is. I don't yet know what the character of Evanston is. I'm still new. I'm very much enjoying it. I love being able to walk my girls to school and be a part of this community. But change is slow. So in Evanston, the total housing stock of Evanston is about 34,000 units. 32% of that is single-family homes, about 11,000. In 2023, the most recent year for which we have complete data, do you know how many single-family homes actually sold in Evanston? 370. I know because I bought one in 2023. And it was very, very difficult. It was very, very difficult, despite us being fortunate enough to not have to worry too much about where in the income range we landed. But it's 3.4%. Nothing about this plan or any changes in zoning forces anyone to do anything with their property. It just makes things possible. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is Sue Lowbach.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sue Lulbach. I am the Director of Advocacy at Connections for the Homeless, and I head up our group called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. And since Friday, when the new draft of the comprehensive plan was released, we've had a group of housing advocates meet several times to review the new draft of the comprehensive plan and discuss a response. Our consensus is that the new draft supports the types of action and change, including zoning reform, that will allow for increased housing affordability and equity without creating or preserving barriers to affordability. We feel that the policies recommended are based on evidence and emerging best practices in urban planning, that they're well thought out, and that they will be very beneficial. We also feel that the narrative portions of the plan that set the stage for the policy recommendations are very high level, written in generalities, and necessarily address intersecting and sometimes opposing community priorities. Because of this, they'll be open to interpretation and will likely be used both to support affordability and equity efforts and to oppose them. We would like to see some of this narrative strengthened to make a stronger case for prioritizing equity and housing affordability in decisions that will be guided by the comprehensive plan. If the city is going to be refining the narrative pieces of the plan, we have recommendations that we'll be sharing with the commission and with staff. However, we feel the real meat of the comprehensive plan is in the policy recommendations, and we believe the city team did a good job of incorporating community feedback to provide a robust policy framework that will provide good guidance for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Phyllis Nickel, followed by Frank Hill, and then Liz Bozant, I believe. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you all for your hard work and all your efforts and time. I'm a housing advocate person. I'm a resident of Evanston for 48 years. I've lived in 3 different wards in very different places. As an advocate, I work with the people who are really pleased with the recommendations in Chapter 10 of the Comprehensive Plan, particularly Policies and Actions section. While we would like to see more explicit references to the need for affordable housing for all levels of income, the recommended policies do a good job of including strategies for reducing the cost of building, allowing more flexibility that can increase options for creating lower cost housing, incentivizing development of affordable units, making efficient use of land, especially that owned by the city, preserving, repurposing, and using existing buildings, and not just relying on new ones, preventing displacement of lower income residents and supporting the landlords who rent them to them, and expanding the search for resources to support affordability beyond the city's borders. We really appreciate the variety of solutions presented in this chapter, as well as the integration of housing into policies recommended in other chapters. And we are really pleased to be able to read this new document. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Frank Hill.
Hi, thank you. My name is Frank Hill. I'm a single-family homeowner in the 7th Ward and an advocate for affordable housing with Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. While we appreciate the specific policies recommended in the comprehensive plan, we feel the case for making equity and affordability throughout the plan's early chapters could be stronger. For instance, Chapter 3, Evanston Today, provides a list of metrics that includes a Gini coefficient of 0.55 related to income distribution, and lists this as being related to the plan's goals of equity, health, economy, housing, and arts and culture. The plan does not interpret what that 0.55 actually means, nor does it mention that, as reported in Forbes in 2022, Evanston has the 10th worst income inequality in the country. Additionally, in its descriptions of Evanston's wards, the plan does not incorporate findings from the city's E-Plan, which shows that the income disparities are related to segregation in Evanston. While the recommendations in the plan are responsive to both the needs of people with different income levels and include measures to fight displacement as well as segregation, the narrative could provide better support for both those recommendations. If the city invests in further revisions to the plan narrative, we would hope to see this metric better explained and emphasized as a reason to change zoning and housing policy to reduce housing costs as a cause of poverty. Thank you.
Next up is Liz, and
No, it's all right. My name is Elizabeth Bryant.
Oh,
I live
okay.
in the 1st Ward. I'm an advocate for affordable housing, and tonight I have the privilege of being with Joining Forces. Evanston has seen a decline in its black population due to gentrification, which is when higher income residents move into a neighborhood and displace lower income residents. Gentrification can cause housing costs to rise, making it difficult for lower income residents to afford to stay. Displacement can strain social networks and make it difficult for residents to age in place. In Evanston's historic Black district, the Black population decreased from 95% in 1990 to 52% in 2020. Another metric we feel could be used more effectively in the report is that of race and ethnicity, which indicates that 42% of Evanston's population is people of color. The plan ties this metric to goals of equity, housing, and arts and culture. Discussion is warranted here, however, because that 42% is in no way a static number and does not reflect what is happening in our community. The description of wards would be more useful if it acknowledges some of the ethnic differences between the wards. Let's highlight the issues that the metrics provided in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Wynn Shaver, followed by Bonnie Wilson and Stuart Cleland.
I'm a sixth ward member, and I'd like to know more about what she's doing with that group. I've lived in Evanston for 40 years and have been interested in housing equity for a number of years and a member of Joining Forces. But I'm going to speak about life expectancy. Life expectancy is another metric that we are glad is included in the comprehensive plan, but one that really should be qualified whenever it appears. The average life expectancy in Evanston is 82 years, which is relatively high and appears in Chapter 3 without any qualification. However, the plan later reports that there's a gap of 13 to 14 years in life expectancies between certain census tracts. We know from Evanston's E-Plan that the same census tracts that show disparities of life expectancy also show disparities of income, health, tree canopy, and housing cost, burden, and other metrics. The E-Plan also shows racial segregation that follows the same geographical pattern, which reflects the redlining maps from the last century. In Chapter 3, which sets the stage for the rest of the plan, this disparity should be acknowledged, and it should be acknowledged as well in the descriptions of Evanston's different wards. Conditions are not the same throughout the city, and data like this should be used to illustrate the need and more explicitly support the policy recommendations that are made later in the plan. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, I have Bonnie Wilson.
Hi, thank you. I'm Bonnie Wilson. I'm been a real estate agent in Evanston for over 40 years and also a founding member of Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. The housing costs burden is that primary driver behind our push for more affordable housing. The recommendations for policies in the comprehensive plan are on target as they relate to housing affordability and reduction of housing cost burden. If the city wants to strengthen the early chapters of the comprehensive plan, which describes the city, more information about the actual community needs would provide better support of the policy recommendations being made. According to the city's consolation plan, approximately 14,285 households in Evanston are cost burden. Of those, 72% are renters, and of those renters, 3,045 households have low or moderate incomes and are paying more than half of their incomes on housing. That housing cost burden stems from low income, a lack of affordable housing within households struggling to pay for their other essentials like food, transportation, and medical care. The issue is worsened by wages not catching up with rising housing costs. We applaud the city in the actions it is proposing to address the problem of housing costs burden. We encourage the city to strengthen its case by providing more narrative around who is impacted by housing costs burden and around how destructive that impact is to those individuals and to our community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Stuart Cleland, followed by Corey King, and then Jill Graham.
Hello, I'm Stuart Cleland. I've lived at 2145 Maple Avenue here in Evanston for 37 years. I'm a member of Joining Forces too. I'm also a member of the Evanston Lighthouse Rotary Club. So as we look at these proposals, it's clear that yes, there's always more that can be done, no matter how great the effort. With the comprehensive plan, there are opportunities to strengthen the case for policies that will increase equity and housing affordability. At the same time, it's also clear that a great deal of research, expertise, and thought has gone into the policy recommendations that are included in the plan. The members of Joining Forces have listed some of the policy areas that are pertinent to our main concerns related to equity and housing affordability. But it's evident that in its recommendations for areas in addition to housing, the city has done an excellent job recommending and showing the intersections among housing policy and health, the environment, transportation, economic development, and even preservation. Housing doesn't matter if the other pieces aren't in place, and vice versa. So it's gratifying to see how skillfully the city has integrated the different areas. Since the comprehensive plan will guide the city for the next few decades, we're glad to see the strength of the policies being recommended. Our only fear with the current draft is that it doesn't call out strongly enough the equity and housing issues that the policies are addressing. While the narratives in the first few sections of the report will not be what provides the bulk of the guidance to future land use commissioners and city council members, it's hoped that the city will consider some of the issues we have raised if they're looking to refine that narrative even further. Thank you again. Thank you so much. We appreciate your patience and your very hard work.
Next up, Corey King, followed by Jill Graham.
Hi, thank you. Corey King. I live in the Historic Ridge District in Ward 2. And I wanted to talk a little bit about creating affordable housing. I know there was some conversation about that earlier today, particularly in the context of the subsidized housing. We're really glad to see that the recommendations in the comprehensive plan are exactly the kinds of things that are needed to ensure that developers of such housing will find Evanston a more attractive place in which to work. One, the direction of increasing density and flexibility will provide more opportunity for developers to find properties that are usable for creation of affordable housing, either through new construction or through the renovation or adaptive reuse. By allowing more flexibility in use of small lots and more density, it will be more possible than it is now for developers to find sites on which to build buildings of the size that will work for affordable development. Two, the policy recommendations around streamlining processes for development, which are already Byzantine for developers of affordable housing, will make Evanston more attractive, Evanston a more attractive development environment. By allowing more development by right and eliminating extra hoops, developers will have a clearer idea of what to expect, which will encourage them to take the risk of applying to develop affordable housing here. Streamlining the process will also save in costs. Last, the recommendation for housing planning is critical. We are eager to see a strategic housing plan which will move forward actual creation of affordable units. Zoning change is the first step, but the strategies suggested in the comprehensive plan will lead to next steps that will be needed. And I just want to say one last thing about the proposed schedule. For those of us who leave here tonight and return to our single-family homes, time is not an issue. But for many, particularly those who can't make it to meetings like this, in this town, the clock is ticking. The more we delay, the greater the challenges become. Thank you.
Next up is Jill Graham, followed by Luke Harris Furry, and Olin Wilson Thomas would be my last speaker.
Good evening. I'm Jill Graham. I live in the 7th Ward, the third of the 9 wards I've lived here in Evanston since the late 1960s. Also, I've served on boards of affordable housing organizations since the 1970s. But most importantly, I taught value-driven strategic management at Loyola University's Business School for decades, although I'm now retired. So I have a great interest in strategic planning. We're excited to see the comprehensive plan taking shape and including strong recommendations for policy. We are especially glad to endorse the implementation of a comprehensive housing policy and strategy, because the comprehensive plan is a long-term visionary document. It lays out values and goals for the future across multiple dimensions of city life. Developing and implementing a strategic housing plan should be based on those values. As stated in the comprehensive plan, it should respond to a detailed assessment of the types and qualities of housing needed for Evanston's population, both current residents and those who work here and would like to live here for shorter commutes to work, but can't afford housing in Evanston now. The comprehensive plan is really not the place for details about implementation, although some have asked for them. But a strategic housing plan should not only define the city's next steps, but also identify who is accountable for what pieces of its implementation, the time frame for that implementation, and how progress will be measured over time. That's what a good strategic plan entails. We're very eager to see the strategic housing plan that the city has been working on. And in order for the city council to be able to assess the contents of any proposed changes to the zoning code, it will be important for them to see the plans related to planning and development moving forward. A few areas that we believe are critical to the strategic housing plan include the following. Anti-displacement strategies that others have spoken to. Supports for landlords of lower cost housing. Incentives for developers of affordable housing. And strategies to raise and spend revenue for affordability measures from whatever source. Those are just a few. We hope that the city can provide staff with the capacity to complete this plan and deliver it to the city council along with the zoning code once this commission has finished its review and recommendations. And I join others in commending all of you on your hard work and the staff as well. Thank you so much.
Oh, we have more people. Okay. All right, that's fine. Next up.
Good evening. I'm Luke Harris for RE. First, thank you for the time that you have given to this process. Earlier today, I asked Google what is a comprehensive plan, and it says it's a long-term vision document that outlines a community's goal for their desired future. It acts in a guiding role, capturing the vision for the city. So this comprehensive plan is not the sole policy, it's simply the guiding document to encourage that policy. Therefore, we believe this new draft of the comprehensive plan is solid and that the city should move forward without bureaucratic or political delay. While we all have pieces of this plan that we would like to see made stronger, the proposed plans are very strong, based on evidence and on evolving best practices, and will not change significantly based on further review or more public comment. The implementation plan section, while brief, shows the intention to review the plan regularly over time, giving opportunity for changes and revisions once we can learn more about the direction the plan's impact is taking. Further speculation on what will happen will not be productive and will not make the plan stronger. This plan provides a good vision, and we need to move on to the next, much more detailed step of the zoning code. That is where many of the issues the community is talking about can and will be addressed, and prolonging the process for the comprehensive plan will not further the conversation. The longer we delay this process, the smaller the dream becomes, and the longer our neighbors who are the most marginalized wait for us. I am a renter in Evanston in the 1400 block of Washington Street, living in a 2-bed, 1-bath, 2-flat. I'm married with 2 young children. My wife and I both have master's degrees. She works at Lydia Home, and we are compensated well in the nonprofit sector, and we are rent burdened with the cheapest apartment we could find, and there weren't many options. So please consider who has the time and the ability to show up to these meetings and speak. It is the people with the most privilege. Ultimately, we make these comments in the spirit of hope and ask you to review this draft of the comprehensive plan and move it forward to the council so that you can get to the hard work of the zoning code. Thank you.
Next up is Olin Wilson Thomas.
Is anybody's zoning reform on the way to fair and abundant housing? No? Okay, mine now. Suit yourself. Good evening. My name is Olin, and I am a Ninth Ward resident. I'd first like to say that it's been a breath of fresh air to finally have someone on Land Use Commission with experience in the affordable housing field that takes a data-driven approach to addressing Evanston's issues. Commissioner Burnlin, thank you and welcome. I'd also like to name a few chapters in the plan that I strongly support. The transportation chapter, now known as the Getting Around chapter, continues to be one of the strongest chapters in the plan. It provides a good framework to improve transit and active transportation networks and details the harmful nature of Evanston's car-centricness. And the arts and culture chapter demonstrates Evanston's wide range of public spaces and events that have been successful in bringing people together in a way few communities can rival. Now for an improvement I'd like to see. I would strongly discourage the use of the word character in this plan. The word is vague, ambiguous, and has become synonymous with NIMBY empires all around the world. This word has been used as a scapegoat to oppose any density increases, and now we see it being used by wealthy, retired, single-family homeowners that have every incentive to keep Evanston expensive. And can we please talk about these stupid yard signs? I mean, look, what are these block things? Like everybody, I mean, okay, right, so I would just say that this rendering puts 1995 Microsoft Paint to shame. Like, let's be real, guys. I mean, how much more depressing could you get? Because clearly this big, gray, character-destroying block is just another attempt to fearmonger residents into opposing zoning reform. But since we're on the subject of R1 zoning reform, perhaps we should go over the current R1 regulations and compare them to the ones proposed in the new zoning code, which I know is no longer up on the website, but let's just go with it. So here's what's the same. The front yard setback, the side yard setback, and yes, even the maximum height. The only significant change is allowing more families to live in the new developments. And what's funny is I haven't heard anyone come up here and complain about the huge, towering single-family homes in their neighborhood. Many of these huge homes have similar square footage and footprints to any floor flats that would be built. So why then do people have so many issues with floor flats? If it isn't the building itself, then it must be the thought of new neighbors coming to town, and that is sad to see. This plan is meant to set up Evanston for the future. So let's consider future Evanston residents who may only be able to move here if more housing is built. I know that Evanston is a progressive place that welcomes bold change, and it's sad to see so many people here tonight that are only thinking about themselves rather than the community that makes Evanston the great place it is. Thank you.
Okay, next up I have Paul Janicki, followed by Ann Trumpeter, and then Linda.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Paul Janicki. I'm an Evanston resident and a practicing architect here in Evanston. And I'm fearful of mass demolitions of historic buildings which is what people are mentioning when they talk about losing the character of Evanston. That is the character of Evanston. I mean, there are other great things about Evanston, but that is what people think of when they think of Evanston. If we demolish landmarks and houses in landmark districts and replace them with larger structures, we not only lose them forever, but also the legacy trees that will be chainsawed down to allow the larger footprints of 4-unit buildings, which, by the way, are bigger than any single-family footprint, and I'm an architect, I can tell you that, which will decimate the existing green canopy. An aldermanic candidate recently said, we shouldn't worry about demolitions of historic structures in Envision Evanston because we have a preservation commission. Well, listen, I'm a huge fan of the Preservation Commission and the people who donate their time to serve on it, but the Preservation Commission is a recommending body. As an architect, I've seen houses in historic districts denied a demolition permit by the Preservation Commission 9-0 and overturned by the City Council 9-0. It is then an uphill legal battle to save these structures. This is a developer's dream. Evanston is nationally famous for its residential architecture, and we need to protect it in the Envision 2045 document, not just the new zoning ordinance. Also, it's noteworthy that the current fabric of our residential districts are exactly what is recommended as the preferred model by the Congress for New Urbanism, which is a policy group of thousands of international urban planners. The work of Daniel Burnham, Halburn Root, Mary Mahoney Griffin, Myron Hunt, George Mayer, Mayo and Mayo, to name just a few world-class architects, will be lost forever without protection. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Ann Trumpeter, followed by Linda Dabachek, and then Jim Slingo.
I'm Ann Trumpeter. I live at 1422 Judson. I've been an Evanston resident for over 20 years. The cost of housing is high in Evanston. And guess what? It is high everywhere. Housing costs are a macroeconomic issue and not something we can control through a plan like this. The plan calls for more market rate housing, but who decides what market rate is? How does market rate address affordability? The idea that a broad brush density increase will create more accessible housing is not a real thing. Density is mentioned many times in this plan. It seems to me that it is a euphemism for upzoning, which is a hot button word for a reason. Increasing density is not a solution to create affordable housing. Increasing density will dictate that it's open season in Evanston for developers at the cost of our unique Evanston aesthetic. I would also like to wonder, why is this process so fast? Why should there be a vote on it in only a few weeks or a couple of months? I know a timeline was discussed earlier tonight. It feels to me that this plan has a long way to go. Envision Evanston 2045 does not feel like a comprehensive plan. It used a very small sample size of survey data to represent what this community wants. I even completed a survey one morning a couple of years ago. I think I spent all of 3 to 4 minutes on it, not realizing that my random reactions would be crunched into a plan we are considering living with for the next 20 years. A comprehensive plan is serious enough that plenty of considered time for a solid review and feedback process is in order. We need more time and more transparency so we can come to a plan worth abiding by. Thank you.
Next up is Linda Dabachek, and followed by Jim Slingo.
Yes, Linda Damashek, 3rd Ward. As an experienced nonprofit affordable housing developer, my greatest concern is the persistent focus on citywide upzoning and increasing density in single-family neighborhoods, which will not create any trickle-down affordable housing, which seems to be the unrealistic, unproven, and preconceived expectation of this entire process. Reality. Evanston has several decades of experience increasing density. Extensive, dense multifamily developments along Chicago Avenue, which are transit-oriented developments, have not produced significant numbers of affordable housing units. No trickle-down affordable housing has resulted from these hundreds of units. Why would we think just increasing overall density would accomplish anything different from the weak results of this dramatic density increase on Chicago Avenue? Another hard reality. Profit-motivated developers will always maximize profits. They will develop the most expensive units at the least cost in all neighborhoods. No developer is required to develop affordable units until greater than 6 units. So in the single-family area, the proposed 4 units would not result in any affordable units being created. And single-family dwellings, I was very surprised to find out it was only 30% of Evanston housing stock. So not much. Anyway, rather than taking a sledgehammer to the city zoning code for single-family districts and the general upzoning, why not try a more effective approach to identify specific parcels citywide that are good opportunities for affordable housing development, using appropriate financing and legal tools to retain affordability permanently by using a community land trust. This approach would be reality-based, actionable, rather than naively hoping for some ever-elusive trickle-down affordable housing, which has not been proven to come to fruition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the final name I have on my list is Jim Slingo at the moment.
Hello, I just want to thank you for working on this. I've read through it almost 2 times, the revised version. Well, it's written really well, but I agree with Linda who just spoke here, that just putting more units on property absolutely will not increase affordable housing. Many friends of mine live in the neighborhoods of Fifth Ward especially, and there's 2 new townhomes across the street from them. Each of them sold for $800,000. Their house was built like 100 years ago, and it's worth about $400,000. So it's just creating gentrification. It's not creating affordable housing. I agree with what she just mentioned. You got to be specific and intentional to create affordable housing. But I did mention and bring my idea. I've done development as well, just basically single family and smaller buildings. And I've mostly been managing for other people. I've done a couple myself. And the idea is that let's keep our current zoning rules in effect as far as the setbacks and all that. I wrote this out, I passed it out before, but I made one mistake. I put 30 feet and 35 feet. 35 feet is the current zoning code for R1. So this one has 35 feet throughout. Fix that mistake. The idea would be to allow a 2-flat on the front of the property with a coach house over the garage in the back. But let them put 3 units in front if one of them was guaranteed to be affordable housing forever. In other words, if the rent would have to be maintained at 33% of the median income, which was $97,000 back in 2023, according to Google. So if they maintain that affordable nature of that housing indefinitely, they could build an extra unit in the front. But it's important to have enough air, enough light, so you have to maintain those setbacks ideas. That is important. We don't want things so close to each other. And then parking is the other issue. I mean, a lot of us do take the bus and all that, but let's face it, we want to have a parking place if our neighbors have a get together, if there's contractors need to come. And the biggest issue is snow. Okay, if you don't have enough parking places that are required, 1 unit per unit, 1 parking place per unit, at least, then in the winter, how can you move from one side of the street to the other to allow snow removal? And that was something I addressed in my point about parking. It's not that we're encouraging people to have more cars, but make room to go from one side of the street to the other side for the even odd snow removal. That's really important for Evanston. You see what happens in Chicago. There's no room to move the cars anywhere. And then a big snowstorm and you got to pay overtime and huge amounts to remove the snow. We don't have to do that in Evanston because we've allowed required parking for each unit. Person doesn't want to use it, fine, then rent it to somebody else. But my point is, I live in the 3rd Ward. It's an absolutely fantastic city. Your proposal, you revised, it's great. I've read it almost 2 times now. So I just hope we can limit this to just 3 units instead of 4. Thank you.
That's all I have on my sign-up sheets right now. Is there anybody else who would like to speak this evening? Okay. In that case, I would like to just reiterate the next meeting where this will be discussed is on March 12th. And I encourage all of you to read the entire comprehensive plan. And in particular, if you have specific sections of language where you feel it's not right, please send in a comment to Megan. Or Megan, I think you can, I think everybody probably has the Envision Evanston website address, but I'll let Megan kind of reiterate how the comments should get sent to us. And as many, we want you to be, if you've got specific ideas for language that would work better, that would be real helpful. And, so that we can start organizing, particularly the discussion by chapters. So I would suggest particularly focusing on the early chapters of the plan would be helpful. Because I think that, just tentatively, the notion would be to start chapters 1 through 6. And then, we may or may not get through all of them, but that would be my suggestion, if that's amenable to everyone, on the 12th. And then continuing that conversation and discussion and consideration on March 19th. I believe we would start both of those sessions at 6 o'clock, if that works for everyone. And I think then at that point, does staff have anything or questions or concerns at this point about moving forward?
I would say if you have comments that you want to provide to the Land Use Commission, the best way is through the comment form that is available on the Land Use Commission's page on the city's website. I do understand that you can't provide attachments. So in the case, if you have a larger attachment, then you can send that to me. My information is on the Land Use Commission page as well, but it would be best to just use the comment form that it's provided at the top of that page.
Question in the electric.
When will the meeting switch to the new building?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
In April.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be here through the March meetings, and then they will transition to 909 Davis after that.
And it would be, even if you don't have specific language, if you could identify kind of page and maybe even paragraph number that you're concerned with, that would be very helpful to staff. Do we have any other comments from commissioners
Yeah,
at
I
this
have
point?
I have a question on process. I'm concerned that I appreciate that we're going to get proposals that are specific text changes. That's very good. Anything that's ambiguous is certainly not helpful. I'm concerned about how we're going to do all of this in 2 more meetings, because what I envision is we're going to receive dozens and dozens of proposals of specific times, and we're setting ourselves up for 2 meetings to potentially discuss all of them. And I don't see how that's going. Someone needs to be clarified for me how that's going to work better.
Chair, do you want to take that, or would you? Because I don't think the intent would be to review all of the comments during the next 2 meetings. Those would be meetings in April, is what I understood the chair's timeline to include.
Yeah, I think that the next 2 meetings are strictly for staff, or not for staff, for the public and the other boards and commissions that are we've asked to take a look at the language and provide feedback so that can be assembled in a cohesive packet for us to begin to consider in the 2 April meetings. If we need more time, then we're going to have to schedule more meetings. So I think it depends on how extensive the comments are and and really kind of, how we feel they can be incorporated into the final draft. And I also would encourage my fellow commissioners to take advantage of staff's offer to kind of meet and walk through and answer any questions you have. Again, it has to be done on an individual basis, so we don't violate Open Meetings Act requirements, but all of that material would, in my mind, would be incorporated into kind of a suggested edit document, for want of a better word, that both the public can see, because it'll be part of our packet, and there'll be opportunity, I would imagine, we will have to have opportunity for public comment as well on kind of the direction. But the commission needs to have some time to deliberate and discuss what's.
Sure, that makes sense. And I appreciate that there's going to be a lot of work done by staff to help assemble all of those proposals. Again, though, I'm just trying to envision what's actually going to happen, because what I'm seeing is that there's going to be probably a spreadsheet of dozens of proposals, and then just people just commenting and talking about it, going on. We've been doing this for months, with these meetings. So how exactly are we going to wade through all of those? Do we need to vote on each? Are we going to go through a spreadsheet and vote on every row?
Well, what I would hope that can happen is, for example, if there's 3 paragraphs on page 32 that are problematic, that, staff will get the 3 paragraph, the paragraphs reprinted saying these are problematic, maybe kind of an overview of some bullet point question, what the issues are, and then propose revised language that staff would draft. So we would be reviewing revised language that then we could vote on. I don't think we can vote on, for example, the first go around when we had kind of the matrix of changes, suggested changes. I don't think that was complete enough for us to vote on, but I would hope that we would be considering suggested revised language, which may or may not be, we may or may not agree with that particular language, but at least we'd have something specific to discuss rather than a general discussion. So I don't know if staff has any more thoughts as to how that would really work. We may not know until they start to try to draft it, but that would be what I would hope. And I'll let staff respond to whether or not I articulated what they're thinking well enough.
Yeah, I think staff remains flexible. We're here to support you in your deliberations. I think it's important for you to start to hear some themes that are coming out of public engagement. I think it's up to you to evaluate whether or not those themes are remaining consistent, which is usually a good indication that you're capturing the perspectives of those who have shown up to provide their perspective. I think we do have concerns, as I mentioned earlier, about being sick, this becoming a very circular process of edits and suggestions and all of that. But we really defer to you as a commission in terms of what your expectation is of taking all of this feedback and trying to present you with some alternative language, because we've heard from the commission that you really want to make a recommendation based on final language and not just provide a list of, changes that you want to see incorporated. So that's where I think the level of specificity that we need to get to at this point really needs to move beyond conceptual and really drill down into specific text changes.
So I'm just thinking out loud in real time, but based on what I'm hearing, I have a little concern here, which is, and I may be misunderstanding, but I feel like we're saying to people, please give us your feedback so we can incorporate it, which I do think is what we should be doing in this plan. But the problem is we are hearing blatantly contradictory feedback, and I feel a little uncomfortable simultaneously asking residents in good faith to give us feedback under the assumption we're going to incorporate it, as opposed to we're going to consider it and kind of, for lack of a better word, rule on it. And so I think if what we're actually doing is saying, please give us your feedback, we will incorporate it, we are never getting this plan moved forward because no one wants the same thing. Or to put it more simply, there's a group that wants A and a group that wants whatever the opposite of A would be, right? So I think we have to make really clear to residents that if we can sincerely act in good faith and also may not be able to make everyone happy. Do you know what I mean? And I know I've made clear my position, but I also can hear other people, and I think there are a lot of concerns, and I agree with thinking this through very carefully. It's huge and all that. So yeah. I'm not trying to be unfair. I'm just trying to both set ourselves up with a responsibility we can actually deliver and be honest with people who are coming here and sharing their opinions. So I don't know how we reconcile that tension.
One thing I just want to offer as a suggestion, you can take the next 2 meetings to continue to collect public feedback on the various chapters as you've discussed already. And then I think at the last meeting of that public comment, you need to start weighing and prioritizing the feedback that you're hearing, because that will give direction to staff on drafting alternative proposals for your consideration. Because you're correct, Commissioner Berlin. Ultimately, at the end of the day, your role here is to hear from the community and to try to reconcile and provide direction to us so we can provide you with the best outcome that you then want to support to move forward to the city council. So, I would encourage you to really listen over the next 2 meetings and hear as much community feedback as you possibly can, and then start to weigh the differing perspectives as a commission, because you may all have different perspectives as well, as you've pointed out, in terms of what the final product would be. But we need to give the community the space and the opportunity to really share their feedback with you on this version.
So just one more comment, and I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but then for people who are investing the time to give feedback, I would just ask, and I know I said it before, but please be specific as you can. So for example, if you're comfortable with duplexes and you're not comfortable with fourplexes, it would be helpful, at least to me, to have you say, I'm comfortable with duplexes, I'm not comfortable with triplexes or fourplexes, as opposed to I'm not comfortable with changing the zoning, or I'm not comfortable with upzoning. Or if you can get comfortable with 6 stories on Chicago Ave and you can't get comfortable with 10 stories on Chicago Ave, right? But I think if we're really operating in good faith, the better we can actually understand tangible areas of agreement and tangible areas of disagreement, the more empowered we are to try to reconcile these different perspectives.
Yeah, agreed. I would, in an ideal world, I would like to see, I would expect that maybe 50 specific proposals get submitted, and then there's a process of consolidating them into like a dozen. And then that is specific for us to look at, and we can, and that's manageable in a meeting or a series of meetings to evaluate each one, take a vote on them one by one, and move forward.
I have one question. Is it possible for staff to give us a very simple summary of what the reoccurring themes are that you've seen in the data coming across? Because we hear a lot of stuff, and if we were told, we know that one of the reoccurring things is slow down, you're going too fast, be cautious. We got that, but there might be some other nuanced issues. For example, the elevation of Chicago Avenue, because some might argue that the other side of Chicago Avenue, we could go higher than this side. If there's a bunch of reoccurring things like that we could have in conjunction with while we're listening to the citizenry, that would help us to be able to sort our thoughts out too.
Yeah, and I think we also need to be careful and understand that a comprehensive plan by its nature needs to be kind of high level in general. And so the zoning discussions as to, what's allowed in any particular neighborhood is really kind of premature for this document. No, I think it's really important for people to weigh in on what they want to see in their neighborhoods. And, again, how they, in part, your point, kind of try to define what character is to you, I think would be very helpful. And kind of, we have, I think pretty much all of our neighborhoods, be they residential or commercial, are mixed use environments. They're not one thing. We're not a suburban community with a dozen single family subdivisions. So I think that's one of the things that we all kind of struggle with is how would you define Evanston's neighborhoods? They're just, every block could be a different neighborhood, and, that would be a valid thing. And so what we're trying to do is have a broad-based policy guide that covers a lot of different topics. And it's not, the reason I'm really anxious to get the input of the other boards and commissions is the comprehensive plan is not just about land use. It's part about land use, but it's part of a lot of different things. And even if you're talking about housing, we may, in the narrative, while we have specific policy directions, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are differences of opinions and that there are viewpoint A and viewpoint B. And over time, that's one of the ways that our elected, officials and community decision makers can evaluate projects as they come along. The fact that policies and strategies, there's conflict within the plan, I think actually is a positive thing. You'd love to have a plan where everything's in alignment and we can all agree on what the direction is, but there's always tension in a community, especially one like Evanston. And I think we need to acknowledge that, and particularly with the narrative, if there, because there are places in the narrative now that they don't sound like Evanston. And those, identifying those places so we can try to get it right and reflect the community is really important.
One last thing. I know it's really late, and I'm sorry, and I feel like I'm about to make a lot of enemies on the LUC, and maybe we could have I don't know. I'm thinking about the point that someone made near the very end about the idea that the people who are able to come to this meeting it's a lot of privilege, and it's true. My kids came with me, and then my husband was able to come pick them up so that they didn't have to be there here tonight, but it's a lot to ask. So is there a way to do a meeting at a different time, for people who maybe work during the week, or is that just too much? Is that just a bridge? I know I heard this. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to think about the dynamics of this.
Yeah, I don't think it's
not feasible.
Well, it's not feasible in terms of the fact that right now we're in a public hearing. So if we were, but I would encourage, again, the community who can't be here and is watching at home or otherwise, not present, to please provide some written comment, because that's a way that they can be part of the process. And the other thing is there are meeting hours. The land use staff has had kind of open meeting hours where anyone can come and talk one-on-one. And if that works better, reach out to the city staff. And I don't know if staff has anything else to add to that or not, but.
No, I think, I appreciate your comment around can we start to create kind of this running list of themes that are coming out? So that's something we will circle back on. I'm certain tomorrow morning and start preparing for you all. Because like I said, it will at least give you some kind of guidance in terms of the buckets that maybe we should start living in and focusing on.
Okay.
But no, thank you. Appreciate all you do.
Well, and we really appreciate having this latest version of the draft. It, I think, is something we can, work with. And I don't know if anybody saw any chapters or anything that were particularly missing. I know I didn't. But if there's anything major, please let staff know as soon as possible. With that, are we?
I just wanted to take 1 minute, if we're moving out of the public hearing into staff comments.
Yes, I suppose first I should ask for a motion to continue the public hearing to March 12th.
I move to continue the public hearing to March 12th.
We have a second from Commissioner Johnson. I guess all in favor say aye. Is that what? Aye. Okay, now we're into communications. Go ahead.
All right. As was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we do have a new planning and policy supervisor that has started with our team, Erin Baines. I would like to give her the opportunity just to share a little bit about herself and her role moving forward with the department.
Chair, should I put my timer on too?
No, I think we're good.
Perfect. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me here tonight. It was really great to experience firsthand how the process of Envision Evanston 2045 has gone, and I look forward to supporting you in drafting exactly what we're looking to escalate to the council. So it's definitely a very exciting time to join. A little bit about me. I do have a background in public policy and public administration. I was also a fellow at the Chaddock Institute for Metropolitan Development, so I have quite the history with DePaul University. And most recently, you'll find that I also have several certifications in hospitality and tourism, diversity and inclusion, and I'm also working on my AICP and Certified Economic Development certifications, so keeping busy. And aside from that, I'm currently also on an advisory body as a lead for the City of Chicago for policy. So definitely staying busy and looking really forward to bringing that work to you and supporting the community as we draft a wonderful comprehensive plan that really markets and embraces the idea of Evanston being the most livable city in America. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anything else?
I've got one thing that should hopefully be a reminder. It is the time of year again for our BCCs, the commissioners, board members, etc., to do their compliance documents. So like the statement of financial interest. I think the clerk sent out
I haven't
emails.
seen it yet.
Okay.
Have you?
And they should be in the near future because I believe they have a new platform to submit those documents, but it is the time of year to start getting all of that together. So be on the lookout for that.
Does that apply to all of us?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's required by the county.
Yeah.
Yes. With that, we move on to public comment. If anyone has any additional comment they would like to make. All right. We do.
That latest sheet was a corrected copy because the other one had the wrong number on it. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. All right. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.